Chapter 498. However, the first to suffer were the remote mountains and forests around them. How could they withstand the power of the blue fire? Although they did not come into direct contact with the fire, it did not take long for them to catch fire. The vegetation in the deep mountains and forests was lush, and the fire was also monstrous. The birds could not fly, and the beasts could not escape from the disaster. They were swallowed by the merciless fire. The blue fire in the sky was dazzling, and the red fire on the ground was emitting thick black smoke. The blue fire in the sky was dazzling, and the red fire on the ground was emitting thick black smoke. The place where the battle was being watched became a cage in the sea of fire. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du, who were panting at the two ends of the sea of fire, were shocked by the scene in the sky and on the ground. How did this happen? The two did not know that the place where the battle was being watched was even more chaotic. There were more than 3,000 people. People were going to die. If they wanted to escape, only a few people with high cultivation were confident that they could break out of this endless sea of fire. Of course, they had to escape from the ordinary fire that was close to the ground. However, most of the people who came to watch the fun had not reached the crossing calamity stage. Those who were below the crossing calamity stage, including those who were in the late nascent soul stage, were not confident that they could escape from this mountain of fire that stretched for dozens of miles. It was even more impossible to escape from the sky, because they were blocked by the blue fire. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the blue flame, slightly straightened out the chaotic aura in his chest. He stood on a black flying sword with a calm face. He floated out of the blue flame sea and looked around. He didn't see the two fellows who had injured him. He immediately activated his true essence and shouted, "Guan Zhongkai, Yulan Du, get out here, you two." His voice shook the surroundings, and the people below could hear it more clearly. When it fell into Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du's ears, it was almost inaudible. However, with their cultivation, they could still hear what it was. Their expressions twitched, and they looked at the vast sea of fire at the same time. They secretly cursed, "Only a ghost would go. There is no way to fight this fight. With our cultivation, we are not afraid of you, but we are afraid of this blue sea of fire. What if you turn this sea of fire into dumplings after we run over? Can we still run out of this place?" The two of them knew that they didn't have the ability to teleport a dozen more times. They really couldn't move anymore. "Guan Zhongkai, Yulan Du, you two shameless fellows, come out quickly, I'll fight you for 300 rounds. Guan Zhongkai, Yulan Du, you two shameless scum, you two cowards, come out if you have the guts, and I'll spare your lives. Yulan City, Guan Zhongkai, your grandfather is here, hurry up and show yourself." Yu Qianqiu stood above the sea of fire and cursed non-stop. Although the two of them were extremely angry, they still felt that their lives were more important. They could only pretend that they didn't hear anything. However, if this matter were to spread out, he would definitely lose face. Many people couldn't stand it anymore. They gathered around Nongzhu and Wenrui to ask for help. "Mr. Nongzhu, Senior Wenrui, please save us. Seniors, please save me. Seniors, please ask Yu Qianqiu to stop. Oh no, someone has already fainted." A group of people surrounded them and begged. Some cultivators in the level of foundation establishment couldn't resist anymore, and dozens of them fainted. Nongzhu was both angry and amused. Why did they come here if they didn't have the ability? Didn't you cheer for Yu Qianqiu when he was injured? Why? Are you scared now? Nongzhu raised her head and pouted to the sky. She said angrily, "Since you can't wait to kill him, why don't you just go up and kill him together? Then you'll be saved. Why do you need to beg me?" Nongzhu's words reminded Furong. Furong looked at these people with resentment. These people cheered for Yu Qianqiu when he was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. It would be better if they were all dead now. This was probably the first time in her life that this pure and kind-hearted woman had cursed with such resentment. Wenrui didn't say anything. Since he knew that Yu Qianqiu had a powerful background, he had decided to stand on Yu Qianqiu's side quietly. The most important thing was that he had already sent a message back on the day when Hu Zongming and Yan Ji picked a fight with him. He told the Wen family not to get involved. Thinking about it now, he felt that he had foresight. At present, except for Wen Bai and himself, there were no other members of the Wen family here. It was not a problem for him to protect Wen Bai. As for the others, he didn't want to offend Yu Qianqiu, who had a powerful background, for them. Therefore, he didn't say anything and let Nongzhu speak. Mr. Nongzhu, I'm a cultivator from the Biqiu country. I heard that you have a good relationship with my ancestor. Please save my life for the sake of my ancestor. After this person spoke, the following words were immediately terrible. Mr. Nongzhu, I'm a cultivator from the Jadeite country. My ancestor also has a good relationship with you. All of a sudden, it was a mess. Nongzhu was stunned. She thought that it was a good thing to have many friends, but it turned out that it was complemented by troubles. This group of people had brought up their ancestors. They could ignore them, but they couldn't ignore their ancestors' faces. Guan Zhongkai, Yu Landu, did the two of you grow up as eunuchs? Yu Qianqiu was still cursing from above. Nongzhu listened to the curses, which were getting more and more colorful. She pointed to the sky and said helplessly, the duel is not over yet. According to the rules, others can't interfere. As soon as she finished speaking, someone immediately begged, Mr. Nongzhu, please ask Yu Qianqiu to let us go. We don't want to watch the duel anymore. Let's go. Yes. Yes. We beg you. A person took the lead to kneel down. Immediately, a lot of people knelt down. Nongzhu coughed and waved her hand, saying, get up. I'll try, but I don't know if it will work. You've seen what happened before. He didn't respect me at all. Maybe it's useless even if I ask. A group of people urged her to hurry up. They really couldn't stand it anymore. Nongzhu cleared her throat and shouted to the sky, Yu Qianqiu, have you cursed enough? If you don't hurry up, the people below will be roasted by your fire. Let them go first and let the innocent people go. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the sea of fire, was furious. Hearing this, he immediately cursed, innocent my ass. They all want me to die early. If you want me to let them go, I'll let them go unless my head grows on my butt. Hey! Damn! You reminded me of something. The people below all looked pale when they heard the first part of the sentence. When they heard the second part of the sentence, the light of hope appeared in their eyes. However, when they heard the second part of the sentence, they were all dumbfounded and regretted begging Nongzhu. They heard Yu Qianqiu shout loudly, Guan Zhongkai, Yu Landu, quickly get out here for lousy, otherwise the 3,000 people down there will all die because of you. While saying this, he controlled the blue flames at the edge of the sea of fire to fall to the ground. All of a sudden, the area within a radius of more than 10 miles was completely sealed, as if a blue hat was put on it. Yulan, who was at the edge of the sea of fire, was a little dumbfounded. Did this guy really dare to burn 3,000 cultivators to death? On the other side, Guan Zhongkai directly denied that Yu Qianqiu dared to do so. He began to shout, Yu Qianqiu, are you tired of cursing? You'd better obediently put away the fire, and we'll pretend that nothing happened between us. If you want to use the lives of 3,000 cultivators to threaten me, then you're too naive. What does their life and death have to do with me? Big coward Guan, don't worry. When I'm tired of cursing, someone will naturally curse for me. I guarantee that your 18 generations of ancestors will never be able to reincarnate. After shouting, Yu Qianqiu shouted, he shouted to the people below, everyone down there, did you hear that? It's not that I don't want to let you go, but Guan Zhongkai thinks that your life and death have nothing to do with him. He's clearly hinting me to burn you to death. Fine, I'll let him get what he wants. No, Mr. Yu, please spare us, Mr. Yu, please have mercy. The panicked shouts from below became a mess. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, let me tell you, because of Guan Zhongkai's words, I've already sealed the area within a radius of more than 10 miles with my blue fire. Flies can't fly out, and ants can't crawl out of holes. Even those at the end of the passing tribulation will have to obediently wait for death. If you want to get out, curse Guan Zhongkai and Yulan out, then I'll let you go. Otherwise, all of you will die. Hearing this, the dozens of passing tribulation stage cultivators who wanted to see the result were instantly dumbfounded. They quickly raised their aura shields and flew through the sea of fire on the ground. It didn't take them long to cover the distance of more than 10 miles. When they reached the end, they found that it was just as Yu Qianqiu had said. The blue fire had sealed the area from top to bottom, and it seemed to be gradually shrinking. Looking at the deep blue wall of fire, it was probably not an ordinary thick wall. It was probably impossible to break out. They didn't dare to take the risk, so they turned around and flew back. Because going back and forth was equivalent to doubling the distance, they felt that they couldn't bear the roasting. When the crowd saw them flying back, they didn't need to ask to know the result was just as Yu Qianqiu had said. One of the returning cultivators at the end of the passing tribulation stage stomped his feet and said, "Guan Zhongkai, why don't you just shut up if you don't want to talk? That voice of yours is going to kill us." Then he smiled bitterly and shook his head at the crowd, saying, "The fire barrier is slowly shrinking. Once it closes in, we will definitely die." They immediately panicked and begged Yu Qianqiu to show mercy. "What do you think?" Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "I have always been a merciful person. The people who harmed you are actually Guan Zhongkai and Yulandu. Scold them hard, at least 100 times harder than when you scolded me. Scold those two cowards until they come out and fight me to the death. If I die, you will naturally be saved. If they die, I promise I will let you go. Damn it, why are you still hesitating? Be careful, or I will roast you like suckling pigs." Unexpectedly, the one who scolded first was the cultivator at the end of the passing tribulation stage who had just left and came back stamping his feet. He roared, "Guan Zhongkai, I am third brother Xian. If you want to fight, then fight. If you don't want to fight, then come out and admit defeat. Don't King harm us. If you don't come out, when I have the chance to go out, I will twist your head off and use it as a urinal. Come out now." Chapter 499. These words were quite shocking. Plus, his cultivation level was quite high, so his voice was naturally loud. Who was third brother Xian? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He did not expect that there would be such a powerful guy among his hostages. Although he didn't know who third brother Xian was, Nongzhu had told him about Guan Zhongkai's identity. Sikongzhu, the eldest disciple of Yin Baikong, a late divine transformation expert, was also an early divine transformation expert, and Guan Zhongkai was his disciple. This meant that Guan Zhongkai was Yin Baikong's favorite disciple. But this third brother Xian actually dared to say that he would use Guan Zhongkai's head as a urinal. Obviously, he was not afraid of Guan Zhongkai. Maybe he was even more powerful than Guan Zhongkai. Guan Zhongkai, who was at the end of the sea of fire, was startled. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and said to himself, "Third brother Xian? Why is he here? I didn't see him at the start. Third brother Xian is also inside?" Yulan, who was at the other end, said to himself with a bitter smile, Guan Zhongkai, why did you drag me into this? Things are getting out of hand now." He said this, forgetting his own greed. Looking at the mountain fire that was gradually spreading into the distance, the great forest was billowing with thick smoke. Yu Qianqiu did not know who third brother Xian was, but the two of them did. One of the four great men in the cultivation world, the world's #1 miracle doctor, the world's #1 beauty, a mid-stage divine transformation cultivator, and the master of Lingfang Valley. Lu Yanqing was his master. Third brother Xian had a total of 9 brothers. The strangest thing was that all 9 of them were born from the same mother. It was rare for one person to be pregnant with 9 twins at the same time. Because of this, the mother almost lost her life. Fortunately, she met Lu Yanqing, the world's #1 miracle doctor, and her life was saved. When the 9 brothers were born, their bodies were weak and their lives were hanging by a thread. It was Lu Yanqing who saved their lives. After that, Lu Yanqing found out that all 9 brothers were talented in cultivation. It was really a rare thing, so she took all 9 brothers as her disciples. After the 9 of them were born, although they were arranged according to the order of birth, their cultivation aptitude did not follow this order. The youngest of the three, ninth elder Exian, was extremely talented and had already reached the early stage of soul formation. Looking at his cultivation speed, he actually had the potential to catch up to his master. The other 8 had also reached the end of the tribulation transcendence stage. Of course, this was not unrelated to the elixir that Lu Yanqing had refined. The 9 brothers always fought together. When one was bullied, the other 8 would take revenge together. Anyone who had anything to do with them would have a headache because of them. He was not afraid of these 9 people, but of their master, Lu Yanqing. As one of the 4 eccentrics, none of them were to be trifled with. Bai Changchun, who was ranked first, had an earth-shattering cultivation. No one dared to provoke him. Wen Lanfeng, who was ranked second, also had a frighteningly high cultivation. Except for Bai Changchun, no one was a match for him. Ancestor Nan Ming, who was ranked third, and Lu Yanqing, who was ranked fourth, although their cultivation was not very high, there were few in the world who dared to not give them face. People who begged them were like ducks. If they really wanted to offend these 2, they did not need to do it themselves. They just needed to casually release the news. Most importantly, Lu Yanqing had a famous protector. It was one of the 4 eccentrics, Wen Lanfeng, who was ranked second in the world in cultivation. Who dared to bully Lu Yanqing? Wen Lanfeng did not even need to speak for her to vent his anger. How many people in the world dared to provoke Lu Yanqing? At the same time, what was the difference between provoking the 9 Exian brothers and provoking Lu Yanqing? Therefore, when he heard third elder Exian's scolding, Guan Zhongkai's forehead was full of sweat. Not to mention him, even his grandmaster Yin Baikong had to be cautious. But no matter how afraid he was, it was not as important as his own life. If he rushed into this blue sea of fire, he could not guarantee that he would be able to come out. He immediately shouted, "Brother Exian, I have no enmity with you. You can't blame me. This has nothing to do with me. The fire was set by that guy. You should ask him to let you out." As soon as he said this, he heard third elder Exian shout, "Bullsh *T. If it's not your business, then whose business is it?" 2 late-stage tribulation transcendents shamelessly jumped out to fight a nascent soul stage. Halfway through the fight, they stopped. If you don't want to fight, then just admit defeat. People scolded you for a long time and you did not come out. Do you have any shame? Let me tell you, you can either come over and continue fighting or admit defeat. You dare to run? If you kill me, I guarantee that even if you hide in the cornucopia, I will drag you out. No one can protect you. Guan Zhongkai was depressed. He did not know what to say. Regardless of whether third brother Exian scolded him or not, there was one thing that he was right about. If he really ran away and caused the death of this fellow, even if he hid in the World Commerce's headquarters cornucopia, the people of Spirit Fang Valley would still be able to find him. He was very clear about Grandmaster Yin Baikong's character. He bullied the weak and feared the strong. Moreover, there were many disciples and grand disciples in the late stage of tribulation transcendence. He would not offend Spirit Fang Valley for him and ruin the big plan. It was very likely that he would come out and apologize. It was really difficult to make a decision. He could not run away. If he went over now, he would be afraid of this deadly sea of fire. If he admitted defeat, he would not be able to raise his head in the cultivation world. What the F***ck is this? Guan Zhongkai laughed at himself. The reason why he jumped out to oppose Yu Qianshou was because he heard that Yu Qianshou killed his junior martial uncle who was also in the late stage of tribulation transcendence in the Chinese cultivation world. In fact, it was not for revenge. He just wanted to please Grandmaster Yin Baikong. Who would have thought that after just a few moves, it would become like this? Of course, Yu Qianshou's 2 treasured sabers were also the reason why he made a move. On the other side, Yu Lan's intestines were green with regret. She sighed repeatedly and simply continued to maintain her silence. Even with Guan Zhongkai's background, he was afraid of third brother Exian, let alone him. Yu Qianshou, who was above the sea of fire, was happy. From the words of the two, it seemed that Guan Zhongkai was really afraid of this guy. He immediately shouted, "Good scolding. Everyone else, start scolding too. Don't worry, with so many people scolding together, he won't be able to tell who is who. Don't be afraid of his revenge." He then added, "I forgot to tell everyone, the fire barrier is slowly closing in. We don't have much time left. Hurry up and scold." These words were well said. Everyone did not dare to scold too much because they were afraid that they would not be able to escape from Guan Zhongkai's revenge. After being reminded, everyone did not hold back and scolded loudly with righteous indignation. "Guan Zhongkai, you cowardly thing, come out, you Landu, shameless villain, if you don't have the guts, why did you come out and throw it?" More than 2,000 people were shouting angrily because hundreds of them had already fallen. It was really noisy. They were scolding all kinds of things, much more ruthless than when they were scolding Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, who was above the sea of fire, grabbed a handful of qi recovery pills and stuffed them into his mouth. He folded his arms and chewed slowly. His expression was not good, and he was calculating in his mind. Since he was in the cultivation world, he could not spit out blood for nothing. Otherwise, everyone would bully him in the future. He wanted to see what those two guys were going to do. If they came, he would kill them. If they didn't, he could only let his subordinates suffer a little. If they wanted to cause trouble, they might as well make it bigger. People died every day, it was just a matter of how many people died. Nongzhu shook her head and sighed. A group of people were scolding Yu Qianqiu not long ago, and now they were helping Yu Qianqiu to scold people. Today's incident was considered to be a worthwhile trip. It was just that her ears were a little numb from the noise. Wen Rui and Wen Bai looked at each other speechlessly. How did things turn out this way? Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were really unlucky. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan, who were on the other end of the sea of fire, turned red and white. It would be a lie to say that they could not hear it. After being scolded like this, even if they were fine, they would have to avoid going out in the cultivation world in the future. Guan Zhongkai was infuriated when he suddenly heard the sound of rushing wind behind him. He turned his head and saw Mi Ruhai and Mi Ruchuan. His expression relaxed slightly. So it's Brother Guan. What's going on? Why? Mi Ruhai stopped halfway through his sentence. There was endless scolding coming from the sea of fire. There were all kinds of scolding, and the scolding was abnormally nasty. When the two of them noticed the abnormality, they were worried about their boss's safety, so they rushed over together. Who knew they would hear this? After looking at each other, they frowned when they saw Fengjing's constantly expanding mountain fire. Mi Ruhai said in a deep voice, "So many people are scolding you and Yulan. Brother Guan, could this sea of fire be caused by both you and Yulan? Brother Mi, don't misunderstand. How could I casually set off such a huge fire in Senior Hua's territory? Furthermore, it's near Dayang City." Guan Zhongkai waved his hands immediately. He was already in trouble, so how could he provoke Hua Zongming? What exactly happened? Mi Ruhai asked with a frown. I've been unlucky for 8 lifetimes. I've encountered a jinx. How unlucky? Guan Zhongkai recounted the situation with a frown. The two brothers were dumbfounded. Their boss had come out to entertain the guests, and they had been staying in the palace. They never expected Yu Qianqiu to have already caused such a huge commotion. After coming to his senses, Mi Ruchuan said anxiously, "Brother Guan, are you saying that my brother is still in the sea of fire?" Guan Zhongkai's eyes lit up when he heard that. He nodded and said, "That's right. Mi Russian is indeed inside. Why don't you two force Yu Qianqiu to release him?" Mi Ruchuan immediately panicked when he heard that. He turned around and shouted, "Second brother, let's go and save big brother." After that, he was about to leave. Wait. Mi Ruhai pulled him back and stared at Guan Zhongkai with a burning gaze. The latter avoided his gaze guiltily. He thought to himself that he was muddle-headed just now. He shouldn't have explained the situation so clearly. Otherwise, he could have used the two of them to force Yu Qianqiu. "Second brother, why are you still hesitating? Big brother is in danger. Mi Ruchuan said anxiously. Mi Ruhai said in a deep voice, didn't you hear what Brother Guan said just now? Yu Qianqiu held the lives of more than 3,000 people hostage. Big brother isn't the only one. If you and I barge in blindly and can force Yu Qianqiu to release him, it'll naturally be good. We can also solve the problem for Brother Guan. If we force Yu Qianqiu into a corner and kill ourselves together, then Big Brother and the 3,000 people would have died in vain. This responsibility isn't something you and I can bear. Chapter 500. The meaning in his words was clear. Mi Ruchuan, who was in a panic, immediately realized and said angrily, Guan Zhongkai, you want to use us two brothers. Let me tell you, if anything happens to my big brother, no matter how powerful your World Chamber of Commerce is, don't even think about leaving Daon Kingdom. Misunderstanding, there's no such thing. Guan Zhongkai smiled apologetically. His mouth was even more bitter than eating yellow lotus. The shock in Mi Ruhai's eyes did not fade away as he watched the sea of green flames that was slowly shrinking. Although the cultivators were used to seeing strange things, the scene was indeed spectacular. Mi Ruhai turned around and stared at Guan Zhongkai with his eagle-like eyes. He said in a deep voice, Brother Guan, there are several thousand people cursing and swearing non-stop. You can't hide here. You have to solve it. Look at the cursing. If you don't come out, then there's no other way. Nothing can happen to my big brother. The last sentence was already faintly overbearing. Guan Zhongkai narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, Mi Ruhai, are you threatening me? As soon as he said this, Mi Ruchuan appeared behind him with a whoosh. The two brothers sandwiched him in the middle. If there was any disagreement, the two would probably fight. Brother Guan is thinking too much. Mi Ruhai said unhurriedly, Yu Qianqiu forced you to hide here and not go over. This shows that the power of this sea of fire is extraordinary. To put it bluntly, you may die if you go, am I right? Seeing that Guan Zhongkai's face was calm and did not speak, he continued expressionlessly, but if you just hide like this, once something happens to third brother Xian, and Lu Yanqing finds Yin Baikong, I'm afraid that your grandmaster will not let you go. In my opinion, sometimes life is more important than face. Admitting defeat is also a way out. Brother Guan. Don't hesitate anymore, make a prompt decision. Guan Zhongkai looked back at Mi Russian behind him. He knew that Mi Ruhai's words were to use peaceful means before resorting to force. If he didn't agree, Mi Ruhai would probably fight. Even if they didn't kill him, at least they wouldn't let him go. Just now, he had used teleportation more than a dozen times in a row, consuming a lot of his true essence. In addition, his flying sword artifact was also destroyed. He estimated that his chances of escaping from the hands of these two people were not high. After pondering for a while, Guan Zhongkai said in a deep voice, Thank you for your advice, brother Mi. I will definitely remember this kindness and repay it in the future. The meaning in his words was worth pondering. Mi Ruhai smiled faintly, stepped aside, and made a gesture of invitation towards the sea of fire. Guan Zhongkai's chest heaved. He was forced into a corner. Gritting his teeth, he roared, Yu Qianqiu, for the sake of the 3,000 fellow Taoists in the cultivation world, I admit defeat. Put away the fire and let them go. The voices under the sea of fire stopped. Although everyone was cursing until their mouths were dry, their faces were filled with surprise. They were just waiting for Yu Qianqiu to release them. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on his sword above the sea of fire, was stunned when he heard Guan Zhongkai's words. He didn't expect Guan Zhongkai to admit defeat. How could he do that? He hadn't even taken revenge for being injured. Yu Lan, who was on the other side of the sea of fire, also found it hard to believe, but Guan Zhongkai's voice confirmed it. He heaved a sigh of relief. Since Guan Zhongkai had admitted defeat, what else could he say? If word got out, Guan Zhongkai would be even more humiliated than him. He immediately shouted, For the sake of the 3,000 fellow Taoists in the cultivation world, I, Yu Lan, also admit defeat. Yu Qianqiu sneered. You want to let things go like this after beating me up? He roared, don't drag out the 3,000 fellow Taoists in the cultivation world to gain face. You know what you are. Also, I don't know what admitting defeat means. As soon as he said that, the people below were in chaos. They all thought that Yu Qianqiu was going to go back on his words. Third Xian, who was in the crowd, glared and roared, Guan Zhongkai, Yulan, will you die if you speak clearly? Yulan was a little better. After all, she was just following along. However, Guan Zhongkai was so angry that he gritted his teeth and roared, Third Xian, I've already said it. It's that brat who didn't follow the rules. Third Xian, don't go too far. Do you really think that the World Commerce Association is afraid of your Lingfang Valley? Third Xian immediately shouted back, stop bullsh**. If you admit defeat, admit it openly. Don't beat around the bush. If the two of you admit defeat and Yu Qianqiu still dares to not let go, us brothers will be the first to not let him go. It has nothing to do with the two of you. Guan Zhongkai had always thought of himself as smart. He didn't expect that the people he met today were all playing tough with him. They didn't give him any leeway at all. He was so angry that his body trembled. Mi Ruhai smiled faintly and said, Brother Mi, Third Xian is right. We've already said it like this. Why do you still care about the shivering? There's nothing wrong with making things clear. Mi Ruhai. Guan Zhongkai glared at him. He was so angry that he laughed and said good a few times. He then roared, I admit defeat. Then he immediately turned around and flew away. Mi Ruchuan looked back and frowned, second brother, are we letting him go just like this? He seems to hate us. Why don't we take this chance to? Mi Ruhai waved his hand and interrupted, don't care about him. The last three words have already made the World Commerce Association lose face. There's no need for us to do anything. Someone will naturally take care of him. I admit defeat. Yulan Dou's voice also came faintly. Everyone under the sea of fire fell silent again. They were waiting for Yu Qianqiu's movement. If he still found an excuse, it would mean that he was deliberately trying to kill everyone. Damn it. Coward. Yu Qianqiu spat out a mouthful of saliva. He didn't think that they would be able to swallow their anger after being so overbearing. The other party directly shouted, I admit defeat. If he still didn't let it go, he wouldn't be able to show his face in the various countries in the future. They wouldn't let him go. I'll settle the score with you two bastards later. Yu Qianqiu slightly calmed the anger in his chest. He floated in the air and opened his arms. The azure flames quickly shrunk with him as the center and returned in an instant. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu discovered that the mountains below were a complete mess and the fire was still spreading. Finally seeing the light of day again, the group of people below finally felt relieved. Looking at Yu Qianqiu in the air, he quickly swooped down on his sword after withdrawing the azure flames. With a slanted drift, he charged into the raging flames burning in the mountains. A miraculous scene appeared. Wherever Yu Qianqiu went, the flames would reach out and wrap around him. In the blink of an eye, the flames would be sucked into his body. Not even a spark could be seen. Within a radius of several kilometers, Yu Qianqiu's figure could be seen flying on his sword. At this moment, everyone finally understood what Yu Qianqiu was doing. So he was extinguishing the fire. Everyone muttered. This guy was like a madman just now, using so many people's lives as a threat, but now he was doing such a thing. It seemed like he was just threatening Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Dou, and wouldn't really do anything. Everyone was just shocked. This was just their wishful thinking, but they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu was not so kind. He had already made up his mind to kill all these people who had insulted him. If it weren't for Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Dou's retreat, this group of people would probably be crying and screaming now. In fact, Yu Qianqiu did not know why he did such a strenuous and unrewarding thing, but he did it anyway. It took nearly an hour to completely extinguish all the mountain flames. When he looked back, the surroundings were already scorched black. He returned on his sword. After landing, he glanced at everyone coldly. The group of people subconsciously stepped back. All of them were a little afraid of him. They had seen this guy kill more than a dozen people in a row, even those in the final stage of the heavens test. Especially the scene where he fought with Chu Dingfang. It would be strange if they were not afraid. Now, no one would say anything. Thousands of people were very quiet, watching him pick up a few storage bags on the ground. Of course, there were also people who were not afraid of him, and Third Xian was one of them. He approached, first bowed to Nongzhu and Wenrui, and then shouted to Yu Qianqiu, "Boy, you've got guts. How dare you treat the lives of thousands of people as a game?" Yu Qianqiu cast a glance at him. He looked exactly like a strong farmer, and his attire was also similar. His aura was similar to old ancestor Nan Ming. He asked indifferently, "Are you Third Xian?" Third Xian was stunned, and then nodded, "Yes, I am Third Xian." "Why, is there a problem?" Without saying anything, Yu Qianqiu took out a storage bag and threw it on the ground, saying, "Let's begin." Third Xian was stunned, and asked, "What for?" "Look at you, you don't seem to be convinced." "The matter is not over yet, I will accept any challenge," Yu Qianqiu said. Third Xian paused, and then waved his hand with a bitter smile, "Don't think too much. I'm not much stronger than Guan Zhongkai, I can't withstand your monstrous fire." "Then what do you mean?" Yu Qianqiu asked. On the surface, he was still cold, but in his heart, he admired this Third Xian. At least he was not so hypocritical. "Nothing else, I just want to have a drink or two with you. I don't know if you will give me face." Third Xian laughed. "Let's talk after I finish." Yu Qianqiu looked around, and said in a deep voice, "Who else is not convinced? Come at me, I, Yu Qianqiu, will accept you at any time. I think that's it for today. If anyone still wants to fight, fight after leaving Dayang Kingdom." Mi Russian said expressionlessly. The three brothers met up and stood together, and their eyes swept across the crowd. On the surface, his words sounded like he did not welcome the crowd to cause trouble in Dayang Kingdom, but in fact, he wanted to leave a fig leaf for the other countries. Who on the scene was confident that they could defeat Yu Qianqiu? Could it be that they were really going to be beaten by him to the point where no one else could participate? How embarrassing would that be? "Those who came with me before, if you still want to return to Dayang Palace, you might as well follow me back. That way, you can avoid some unnecessary trouble." Mi Russian said this, and the three brothers flew away together. The few hundred people who came out also followed. Yu Qianqiu and the others were no exception. As for the rest of the people, including those who had fainted from the high temperature and were rescued, they also left. In the blink of an eye, the place became empty. The group of people returned to the hall of Dayang Palace, and it was much quieter. Yu Qianqiu found that Third Xian, who was originally not in the crowd, also came, and followed him. Chapter 501. After the green flames in the distant sky disappeared, the people of Dayang City felt that it was strange, but they gradually lost interest. After all, it was too far away, and they did not know what had happened. It was just another topic of conversation. The entire Dayang City quickly returned to peace, and the people's interest shifted back to the martial arts competition. The excitement of the rich and powerful easily attracted the attention of the common people. On the drill ground of the palace, more than 10 arenas were competing at the same time. Zhang Peng was in the Baiwan nation's lineup, and he had already fought 5 matches. Ordinary children of rich and powerful families who practiced martial arts were no match for him. He was an old general who had fought on the battlefield, and his speed and eyesight after cultivation were far superior to mortals. He did not want to waste time with those mortals, so he beat his opponents to the ground with a few punches and kicks. He suppressed his cultivation, or else someone would die. After he left the arena, he returned to the Baiwan nation's lineup and felt bored. He was tall, but he looked listless. Although he kept a low profile, his moves were too conspicuous. Not only did he attract the attention of the competitors from various countries, but he also alerted the spies in the palace. The news quickly reached Zhao Heng's ears in the imperial study. Zhangpeng? Zhao Heng looked at the eunuch in shock. The old eunuch with white hair on his temples smiled and said, "Master, you worry too much. This Zhangpeng is not Zhangpeng from Huaxia Nation, but the youngest son of an old general from Baiwan Nation. Because he cannot inherit the title of nobility, he came to Dayang Nation to find a way out." Zhao Heng nodded and asked, "You said that he won 5 matches in a row, and he did not use more than 3 moves in any of them? With such good skills, even if he cannot inherit the title of nobility in Baiwan Nation, can't he find a good way out?" "Master, you know the situation in Baiwan Nation. It is normal for brothers to kill each other. I think it is because of this that he came to Dayang Nation," the old eunuch said respectfully. Zhao Heng thought for a while and did not say much. He only ordered, "Pay close attention to this person. If he is really a talent, try to recruit him." The same news quickly spread to the Lu Xiang house in the West Palace courtyard. The 3 sisters had also been paying attention to the news of the competition. When they heard that there was an outstanding figure called Zhangpeng, the 3 sisters looked at each other in dismay. How could there be such a coincidence? The eldest sister, Zhao Rongxiang, hurriedly asked the servant who relayed the news about Zhangpeng's origins. After learning that he was from Baiwan Nation, the 3 of them heaved a sigh of relief. None of the hundreds of cultivators in the side hall spoke a word. All of them were looking at Yu Qianqiu. Everyone knew that after today's battles, Yu Qianqiu's name would be well known in the cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu and Xan Laosan were staring at each other. What made Yu Qianqiu depressed was that wherever he went, Yu Qianqiu would follow him. Whenever he sat down, Yu Qianqiu would sit beside him, smiling foolishly. How disgusting! Normally, other cultivators were not allowed to enter the palace, but the 3 Mi brothers obviously turned a blind eye to this guy. No one else had any objections either. It seemed that he really had some background. "Xan Laosan, why do you keep following me?" Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't stand it anymore and asked impatiently. Xan Laosan was a little puzzled and said, "Didn't we agree? I'll buy you a drink." "I don't think I agreed." Yu Qianqiu snorted. Xan Laosan waved his hand and said, "It's okay. It's not too late to agree now." Nongzhu, who had been quietly watching the show, giggled. She also didn't know why Xan Laosan kept following Yu Qianqiu, but it didn't stop her from watching the show. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "There are so many people here, why do you want to drink with me? What's the use of so many people? Just set a fire and it'll be over." Xan Laosan said loudly. Everyone in the room blushed at his words. Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, this guy is a little heartless, but so many people are afraid of him. He paused and asked, "Xan Laosan, I don't drink with people I don't know for no reason. What's your background? You don't even know my background?" Xan Laosan acted as if he had heard something unbelievable. Yu Qianqiu showed a look of disdain and said, "You don't look like a spirit-severing expert." Xan Laosan ignored his sarcasm and patted his chest. He said proudly, "I come from Lingfang Valley. My master is the Valley Master of Lingfang Valley." Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment, then his eyes lit up and said, "Your master is the world's most beautiful woman, Lu Yanqing? What do you want?" Xan Laosan immediately became alert. He had seen this person's eyes and tone in many people who had evil intentions towards his master. He. "It's nothing, just casually asking." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. But this guy kept staring at him, he was full of thoughts. Maybe he had some ulterior motives. At this moment, outside the hall, Mi Russian walked in. He cupped his hands towards the crowd and said, "Everyone, today's competition ends here. We have already selected 100 winners from each country, and they will continue to compete in the next few days." After saying this, he stopped. His meaning was obvious, he was sending the guests off. No one wanted to stay here for a long time. Not only were they not allowed to walk around, they were also not allowed to watch the competition. Of course, everyone understood that this was because they were afraid that the cultivators would secretly help the contestants of their country and interfere with the fairness of the competition. The group of people began to disperse and walked out of the side hall, returning to their respective protected targets. Among the contestants, some were happy and some were worried. Those who were happy were naturally successful, and those who were worried were naturally eliminated. After returning to Baiwan, everyone got on the carriage and went back. In the carriage, Yu Qianqiu saw Zhang Peng's dejected look and asked curiously, "Zhang Peng, what's wrong? Is there anyone who is your match?" "No, I won 5 matches in a row." Zhang Peng said sullenly and then smiled bitterly, "Master, can we not compete? It's really boring." Yu Qianqiu looked at Nongzhu and Furong in the carriage and said, "Let's talk about it later." After the group of people returned to Baiwan's embassy, they had just entered the small courtyard when they suddenly saw a person flashing through the air. Nongzhu, who was the fastest to react, grabbed the person's neck before he even landed. This person was none other than third brother Xian. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. This guy actually followed them here. Zhang Peng looked puzzled, not knowing who this person was. Third brother Xian, whose face was red from being choked, said intermittently, "Senior Nongzhu, please have mercy." Nongzhu sneered, "Third brother Xian, you really don't want face when I'm trying to save you. You actually dared to break into my residence without permission. Others might be afraid of your master, but I'm not. Believe it or not, if I cripple you, your master will at most scold me." After that, she threw him aside and rolled on the ground a few times. Yu Qianqiu secretly clicked his tongue. In the hands of a soul-forming cultivator, a cultivator at the late stage of crossing heaven's tribulation was like a chicken. It was very difficult for him to defeat a cultivator at the late stage of crossing heaven's tribulation. This was the gap between them. Third brother Xian gritted his teeth and got up. He bowed and apologized to Nongzhu. It was true that third brother Xian and his brothers could do whatever they wanted in the cultivation world because of their master, but there were indeed people they were afraid of. Needless to say, there was the most powerful master in the world who almost flattened Lingfang Valley. Mr. Nongzhu was also someone they could not afford to offend. If he taught them a lesson, their master would not say anything. Moreover, Wen Lanfeng would not necessarily look for Nongzhu to settle scores with. "Tell me, what are you doing here?" Nongzhu shouted. Third brother Xian answered obediently, "Senior, I'm here to have a drink with him." He pointed at Yu Qianqiu. "Don't talk nonsense with me." Nongzhu glared at him and shouted, "Get out of here." Third brother Xian trembled in fear. Before he could turn around, he saw Wen Rui teleporting. Wen Rui glanced at third brother Xian and said to Nongzhu anxiously, "Sir, I have to go back to Baiwan country. I'm afraid I can't accompany you." Nongzhu frowned and said, "What's wrong? You look so anxious. Did something happen in Baiwan country?" The others also looked at him. Wen Rui paused and shook his head. "To tell you the truth, our ancestor has come out of seclusion." "Ah!" Nongzhu and third brother Xian, who was secretly eavesdropping, screamed at the same time. Furong and Zhang Peng did not know who they were. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, "Has Senior Wen Lanfeng come out of seclusion?" Wen Rui nodded silently. Third brother Xian, on the other hand, had teleported away with a swish sound. He was suspected of informing Wen Rui. Nongzhu smiled bitterly, "This is troublesome. Wen Lanfeng, don't be impulsive." Then she pointed at Wen Rui and said anxiously, "Wen Rui, go back as soon as possible and find a way to stop Wen Lanfeng. Don't let him go to the demon domain now. Old Bai has urgent matters to attend to. If he goes there now, he will be courting death." Furong and Zhang Peng looked at each other and did not know what they were talking about. Yu Qianqiu understood. He knew that when Lanfeng went into seclusion after being defeated by Master. Now that he came out, he would probably go to Master to fight again. Wen Rui nodded and turned around. He turned back and said with a solemn expression, "Sir, I have something to ask you. I hope you can tell me the truth." "Say it." Nongzhu frowned and did not know what he was hesitating about. When Roy was puzzled, our ancestor has been in seclusion for 100 years. When he comes out, his cultivation must have improved greatly. But from what you said, do you still think that our ancestor is no match for Bai Changchun? How can a grain of rice compete with the bright moon? Nongzhu sighed and said, ordinary experts at the late stage of transforming spirit realm, no matter how high their cultivation is, can make people feel a bottom line. But Bai Changchun always gets stronger when he meets strong opponents. His cultivation is so profound that it is unfathomable. He is a powerful existence that cannot be judged by common sense. Although I don't know how high Wen Lanfeng's cultivation is after coming out of seclusion, I know that if he provokes Bai Changchun again, he will lose his life. Chapter 502. When Roy's face turned pale in an instant, he said, "Is Bai Changchun invincible forever?" Alas. Nongzhu patted him on the shoulder and said, Bai Changchun didn't summon Wen Lanfeng because you saw the battle in the East Sea. But let me tell you, Bai Changchun didn't do his best at all. When you go back, just tell him the scene of the battle, and Wen Lanfeng will retreat. Go quickly. You will regret it if you are late. Thank you for your advice. Wen Roy bowed deeply. He understood that there was no successor for the Wen family. His cultivation was not enough to withstand the wind and rain for the Wen family. Once the ancestor died, the whole Wen family would suffer a disaster. After saying his thanks, he quickly disappeared. There was a sound of rapid flying in the air. The yard was quiet for a while. Although Furong and Zhang Peng did not know the reason, they could tell that it must be a tricky matter. Yu Qianqiu asked, will Wen Lanfeng really go to my master after he finishes his closed-door training? Zhang Peng was shocked. No matter how stupid he was, he could tell that his grandmaster was an invincible existence. For a moment, he stood there silently with a surge of emotions. Nongzhu shook her head and said with a wry smile, I really don't know what to say about Wen Lanfeng. He is obviously a genius, but he is deeply in love. You can't imagine how obsessed he is with Lu Yanqing. For Lu Yanqing, he will definitely fight with your master after he finishes his closed-door training. But your master is now at the critical moment of refining the spirit treasure. If Wen Lanfeng goes now, I'm afraid your master will not be merciful anymore. Yu Qianqiu smiled and also felt that this kind of person was very interesting. He asked, doesn't Wen Lanfeng know how to run when he can't win? Nongzhu looked at him with deep meaning and sighed, you haven't seen what your master is like when he really fights, so you don't know how terrible he is. Run? If Wen Lanfeng angers your master, where can he run to? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He had never seen what his master was like when he fought. He thought about it and asked, doesn't Lu Yanqing know how to persuade him? Are you willing to see him take the risk? Hearing this, Nongzhu looked around and found that Xian Laosan was nowhere to be seen. She smiled bitterly and said, if he knew the news, he would probably advise me. I hope third brother Xian can send the news back in time. What I fear is that Wen Lanfeng will head straight for the Yao region the moment he comes out from his cultivation retreat. That would be interesting, Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself. That's why I can't stay here any longer. I have to rush back to the demon ghost territory. I hope I still have a chance to stop this from happening. Nongzhu suddenly stared at Furong, who was blinking her eyes, and said, little girl, come with me. Furong was stunned and weakly asked, where are we going? You didn't tell her? Nongzhu turned around and asked. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head in embarrassment. He walked over and held Furong's shoulder. Furong, it's like this. Since you're with me now, you should at least pay your respects to my master. Go with Senior Nongzhu. Before he could finish, Furong grabbed his arm and asked nervously, you don't want me anymore? Are you kicking me out? Don't kick me out, please. Yu Qianqiu's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly felt pain, but a warm smile hung on his face. He gently pulled Furong into his arms, gently patted her back, and said, silly girl, how could I not want you? I'm afraid that one day you won't want me anymore. I won't. I want to be with you for the rest of my life. Furong buried her head in his arms and tightened her hands around his waist. Listen to me. Yu Qianqiu gently pushed her away and said very seriously, as a disciple, I feel very guilty that I can't be filial to my master. Since you're my woman, you have the responsibility to be filial to my master. Senior Nongzhu is my master's close friend. He will take you to my master. I've talked to Senior Nongzhu. If there's a chance, he will take you to his purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. There are many beautiful purple bamboos there. I'll go to see you then. Furong's face was full of reluctance, but she slowly lowered her head and said softly, I know. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. She didn't expect this guy to have such a warm side. He was obviously afraid that this girl would be in danger with him, but he still tried to coax her. She couldn't help but tease him by sending a voice transmission, Boy, is this a white lie? Yu Qianqiu didn't bother to pay attention to him. He gently lifted Furong's face and slowly took off the human skin mask on her face. He shook it in his hand and said, When I miss you, I'll take out your face and have a look. When I'm free, I'll go to see you immediately. After revealing her original face, Furong blushed after hearing these words of love. She looked at Nongzhu and Zhang Peng with embarrassment. Master is so mushy. Zhang Peng shuddered and turned around. Nongzhu raised her eyebrows and thought to herself, I knew it. I thought there was something wrong with this guy's appreciation ability. It turns out that he is also a stunning beauty, but not as beautiful as my Z. All right. You two don't have to talk about love anymore. Yu Qianqiu, before I leave, I have something to tell you. Nongzhu's words broke up the affectionate couple. Yu Qianqiu came over and bowed respectfully. He said, Senior, please say it. I'm all ears. Nongzhu felt a little uncomfortable when she heard these words. She guessed that this guy had changed. His words were so polite that they were mushy. She glanced at Furong behind him and immediately understood. This guy was still the same. He pretended to be obedient when he needed help. Now was not the time to argue with him. She said with a serious expression, Yu Qianqiu, I have to remind you. Don't go too far when you stir up trouble here. Experts in the soul formation stage are not like those cultivators you've met. When they fight, it's as simple as releasing two flying swords. At this stage, they fight with lightning. It's not something you can withstand with your current cultivation, so you'd better not provoke them. Don't think that your blue fire is very powerful. It can deal with those in the crossing calamity stage, but it's useless against those in the soul formation stage. You've tried it with me in the South Sea. You should know that the blue fire has no effect on me. You're on your own now. Thank you for your advice. I'll keep it in mind. Yu Qianqiu bowed. He looked very respectful, but no one could tell what he was thinking. Let's go. Nongzhu said. She covered Furong with a light ball and quickly flew away. Yu Qianqiu didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to Furong. She was already gone. Yu Qianqiu withdrew his gaze and said slowly, The two soul formation stage cultivators have left. If we stay here any longer, I don't know if someone will come looking for trouble. Zhang Peng's eyes lit up and said, Master, I don't want to participate in that competition anymore. Why don't we leave Dang City now? Yu Qianqiu turned his head around and said with a sneer, Don't worry, we are not in a hurry to leave. We can't let Hua Zongming take advantage of us like this. He immediately forgot what Nongzhu just told him. He patted Zhang Peng's shoulder and joked, Have a good competition and try to get the princess into bed as soon as possible. Master, do you really want me to be the son-in-law of Dang Kingdom? Zhang Peng was stunned. Damn. Don't you know what a joke? Yu Qianqiu coughed and said, There's no rule that says if you sleep with the princess, you must be the son-in-law, right? Then he brushed past Zhang Peng and said, You rest. I'll go find the person who invited me to drink. Zhang Peng was stunned and thought back to his words. Yu Qianqiu probably didn't expect that a casual joke of his would really make this guy do something stupid. Yu Qianqiu wandered to the gate of the embassy. He looked around and leaned against the high wall outside the gate, looking around. The guards at the gate looked at each other. They all knew that he was an important guest, but they did not know what this important guest wanted. He acted like a beggar. In fact, Yu Qianqiu was waiting for someone. He was waiting for Xian Laosan, who was always following him. He believed that Xian Laosan was not following him just because he wanted to buy him a drink. He must have something to tell him. Since he had something to tell him, he would definitely come back. He was afraid that Xian Laosan would be scared by Nongzhu and would not dare to go in. Therefore, Yu Qianqiu waited for him outside the gate. Just as Yu Qianqiu expected, after about an hour, Xian Laosan came out of nowhere. He shook his head and sighed while looking at the high wall of the embassy. He did not dare to go in again. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu cursed. If he had known earlier, he would have stood at the corner of the gate. He leaned against the wall and pretended not to see anything. Xian Laosan was bored and looked around. Finally, he saw him. At first, he thought he was mistaken. He rubbed his eyes, but the figure leaning against the wall looked very much like Yu Qianqiu. He could not help but walk over and poke his head over. It was indeed Yu Qianqiu, who was taking a nap with his head slightly lowered. He laughed and said, "Yu Qianqiu, it's really you. Why are you hiding here?" Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and ignored him. He said, "Can't I bask in the sun?" Bask in the sun? Xian Laosan looked at the darkening sky. Some people had started to light up their lanterns. There was no sun at this time. After a while, he suddenly realized, "Oh. I understand now. Did Mr. Nongzhu kick you out?" "Ah. I understand. Mr. Nongzhu's temper is not very good." He shook his head and sighed. He touched his neck subconsciously, probably remembering the time when he was beaten by Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu wanted to laugh when he heard his self-justifying explanation. He found that this guy was a little silly. So he deliberately asked with a sullen face, "What are you doing here again?" Xian Laosan clapped his hands and smiled. He pulled his sleeves and said, "Let's go. I'll treat you to a drink. I know a good place in Dayang City." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and stared at him for a long time. His eyes were rolling around. No one knew what he was thinking. Xian Laosan felt guilty and asked, "What are you looking at?" "Nothing." Yu Qianqiu leisurely said, "It's not that I can't accompany you to drink, but I like to drink wine with women." He raised his hand and pointed at a distant street where colorful lanterns were lit and a place full of women were chattering. Chapter 503. Third Xian's eyes followed and his face turned green. He shook his head like a rattle. No, I can't go to that place. I can't go there. Let's go somewhere else." His master, Lu Yanqing, was the most beautiful woman in the world. There were many lechers in the cultivation world who came here because of her. The whole Lingfang Valley hated lechers the most. How would he dare to go to a brothel? If this got out, his brothers would beat him half to death even without his master's punishment. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and looked at him playfully. "What? Are you worried about money? If that's the case, then forget it. I only like to go to those lively places to drink. I don't want to go to other cold and quiet places." Third brother Xian pulled him back and said with a bitter face, "It's not about money. I can afford to drink wine no matter how expensive it is. But brothels and similar places are forbidden to the disciples of Lingfang Valley. Let's go somewhere else. There must be a more lively place." What a joke. Yu Qianqiu shook his hand off and snorted coldly. "What right do you have to apply the rules of your spirit Fang Valley to me? I just like to go to places with a lot of pretty girls to drink. Don't ask me to drink if you're not sincere. Don't look for me again. Sigh. Don't go. Let's talk about it." Third Xian stared blankly at Yu Qianqiu, who ignored him and went back into the embassy. He walked around the wall helplessly. After a while, Yu Qianqiu came out of the embassy again. He was wearing a brocade robe and waving a big golden folding fan in his hand. The big group of rich peonies was dazzling. He walked with his feet splayed and swaggered towards the pink slumber brothel. He had the demeanor of a playboy going to a brothel. Third Exian was dumbfounded. He thought to himself, there are all kinds of birds in a big forest. Although he thought so, it did not stop him from following Third Exian. Yu Qianzhou glanced at him, who was following him with his head lowered. He was also wondering why this guy was looking for him. He was willing to go against the rules and visit a brothel with him. Neither of them spoke. When they were about 10 meters away from the brightly lit building, Exian Laosan pulled him back again. Yu Qianzhou scolded coldly, "Why are you dragging me again? Let go. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." "Alright, you're amazing. I know you're the strongest below the soul formation stage. How about I call you Master Yu?" Third brother Exian smiled bitterly. Yu Qianzhou's expression softened a little. He did like the title of the number one expert, even if it was below the soul formation stage. However, his words were merciless. "With your age, I can't afford to be your uncle. If you have something to say, spit it out. If you have something to say, spit it out. It's fine to drink here, but you're not allowed to do anything else." Exian Laosan gritted his teeth. "Let go." Yu Qianzhou knocked his hand with his fan. "You don't need to treat me, and I don't need you to accompany me. I can afford to have a drink with the courtesans. I don't need anyone to interfere with my freedom. Get out of my way. From today onwards, I won't have anything to do with you." "Wait." Exian Laosan took a step back. "I won't interfere, but you have to promise that you won't tell anyone else that I'm here." As soon as he said this, Yu Qianzhou's gloomy face brightened up. He put on a smile and patted his chest. "Don't worry about that. You can ask around in the Chinese cultivation world. I'm famous for keeping my word. I'll never tell anyone else that you're here. Only the heavens, the earth, you, and I will know about this." "Ha! That's good, that's good." Exian Laosan's face was full of embarrassment. "Let's go." Yu Qianzhou dragged him along. Exian Laosan kept looking around, afraid of bumping into someone he knew. The 3 golden words "Warm Spring House" shone brightly under the colorful lights. It was a gold-lettered signboard. The entrance was full of beauties. One by one, they pulled the passers-by inside. Some who didn't want to go in at first couldn't resist the crowd of breasts. They touched their money pouches, clenched their teeth and went in. Yu Qianzhou was dressed like a rich playboy. It was very eye-catching. One look and you could tell that he was a rich man. The eyes of the girls below Warm Spring Building immediately lit up, and they swarmed over, squeezing and rubbing against each other. Yu Qianzhou laughed unscrupulously and walked in. Third brother Exian closed his eyes under the heavy encirclement. He was almost dragged in by Yu Qianzhou. Once he entered the door, he felt his body turn cold. "Young master, young master, young master, old master." A series of greetings were spat out, making people's bones go soft. Yu Qianzhou was obviously not afraid of this scene. He folded his fan and flicked it here and there, tapping here and there. Exian Laosan was already a little stunned. At this moment, a middle-aged brothel keeper came up to them. Before she could say anything that would make people's hearts ache, Yu Qianzhou waved his fan and sneered, "Good private room, good food and wine, red card girls. Not a single one can be missing. Otherwise, I'll get people to tear down your broken brothel." His words caused a bit of an awkward silence. The brothel keeper was stunned. But she was also a person of etiquette. Naturally, she wouldn't be annoyed by a word or two from a guest. She immediately put on a smile and turned around to greet the guests. The surrounding immediately returned to singing and dancing. The brothel keeper personally led the two to a large suite and asked if they were satisfied. She secretly looked at the two curiously. It was the first time she saw a hedonistic son forcefully dragging a farmer-like man to a brothel. Stop nagging and quickly make the arrangements. Yu Qianqiu took out a gold ingot and threw it to the brothel keeper. He shouted without hesitation, "Scram!" The brothel keeper caught the gold ingot and weighed it in her hand. When she realized it was real, her face bloomed with joy. He was indeed a rich man. She didn't care how unpleasant the guest's words were and quickly retreated. Money makes the world go round. This generous man's service could be said to be godlike. Not long after, the good food and wine that Yu Qianqiu ordered and the red card girls arrived. For a moment, the room was lively with singing and dancing. As he listened to the tune, Yu Qianqiu's mouth moved from left to right. A mouthful of wine, a mouthful of food, all of which were served by someone. His two hands were touching everywhere, provoking a series of cries of "annoying." Xian Laosan was surrounded and hugged by a few girls, but he felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He didn't dare to act rashly. He was like a block of wood, looking at the girls as if they were skeletons. Touch your waist. So flirtatious. Touch your back. Sleep with me. Touch your thighs. So much water. Yu Qianqiu was singing an obscene song. Wherever he sang, his hands would touch. He kept flirting with the girls. Xian Laosan stared at him dumbfounded. Seeing how smooth he was playing, he was sure that this guy was a frequent customer of such occasions. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him from time to time, but seeing that he was unmoved, he gradually lost interest. A seductive girl with half of her snow-white breasts came up to him and said, "Master's song is really good. This is the first time I've heard it. Please do me a favor and teach me. Once I master it, I'll definitely sing it for you." "You think I'm a singer?" Yu Qianqiu's tone was cold. The smile on his face disappeared instantly. His gaze was like a sharp knife, scaring the girl. The girls around him looked at each other and immediately came up to ease the atmosphere. "Get out, all of you get out!" Yu Qianqiu shouted. With a wave of his arms, 5 or 6 girls fell to the ground. He pointed at the girls around Xian Laosan and said, "You guys get out too. Without my permission, no one is allowed to come in." A cold and gloomy aura caused the dozen or so girls to shiver, and they immediately retreated with pale faces. Without the chattering and soft girls around him, Xian Laosan heaved a sigh of relief. Yu Qianqiu picked up the big fan on the table, opened it and waved it. He said coldly, "Tell me. What do you mean by following me around?" Xian Laosan was stunned. He waved his hand and said, "Nothing, nothing. I just want to be friends with you." "Bullshit." Yu Qianqiu closed his fan and pointed at his face. "Your face says that you have ulterior motives. You don't even know how to lie." No, I really don't." Xian Laosan denied again. "Fine, since you don't want to tell me the truth, then let's go our separate ways. You go your own way and I'll go my own way. We'll have nothing to do with each other in the future." Yu Qianqiu turned around and left. "Wait." Xian Laosan blocked his way and said helplessly, "I really don't want anything from you. I just want to be friends with you and invite you to Lingfang Valley as a guest." "Is it really that simple?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. He thought to himself, inviting me to Lingfang Valley is the real reason. Xian Laosan nodded sincerely and said, "It's really that simple." Yu Qianqiu looked at him in disgust. He did not believe his words at all. But he was a master in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage. For him to be so humble, he must have something to ask of him. He did not expose him, as long as he knew what was going on. He smiled and said, "You want to be friends with me? Do you know that I have a lot of enemies? Aren't you afraid that I'll drag you down? What's the point of being friends if I'm afraid of this? A true friend should share blessings and difficulties together." Xian Laosan patted his chest happily. Share blessings and difficulties together? Why does it feel like there's a trap in his words? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He noticed that Xian Laosan's eyes were a little unfocused when he said this. But now he really believed that Xian Laosan wanted to be friends with him. Because the phrase, share blessings and difficulties together, had a profound meaning. Hee. That's a good word. I like it. I'll be friends with you. Come, let's go to my place and have a chat. Yu Qianzhou said happily. He thought to himself, let's put blessings and difficulties aside first. Let's get a bodyguard to accompany me first. This was also the reason why he came to find Xian Laosan this time. Before he left, he threw out another ingot of gold. The madam was so happy as if she had seen her own father. She kept asking them to come again next time. After returning to the embassy, Yu Qianzhou arranged for Xian Laosan to stay in a small courtyard for the time being. Xian Laosan calmly accepted the arrangement when he found that Nongzhu was not there. In the dead of night, Yu Qianzhou quietly disappeared from the room. When he reappeared, he was already in the wilderness. Chapter 504. A cold crescent moon hung in the night sky, and the stars in the sky shone brightly. In the wilderness deep in the mountains, the area that had been burned by the fire during the day was pitch black under the moonlight. In this place where the intense battle had taken place during the day, Yu Qianzhou stared at the 50 members of the special forces in front of him. Apart from their team uniforms, all of them had changed into ordinary people's clothes, revealing their original appearances. You all seem to be in good spirits. Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly and said, I still remember that when you first joined Utopia, most of you were still at the core formation stage. In just a few years, all of you have reached the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. My painstaking efforts to nurture you all weren't in vain. The 50 of them clenched their right fists in unison and bowed slightly. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand, and his expression gradually turned solemn. He said in a deep voice, soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. A few days ago, I asked for 50 capable members from your chief instructor, and Director Guan chose you all. I hope you won't disappoint me. We'll do our best until our last breath. The 50 of them replied in unison in a low voice. I don't want you to die. I want you to live. I want you to live and complete the mission. The hard work we put in today is so that we can live a better life in the future. This is the dream that we Utopia people have been fighting for all our lives, so I don't need you to die, Yu Qianzhou said in a calm and affectionate tone. The 50 of them clenched their fists and bowed again in excitement. Yu Qianzhou nodded in satisfaction and said, the code name for this mission is Scout Point. Do you all understand the mission's objective? Keep a low profile, the 50 of them replied softly. That's right. Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly and said, I don't need you to fight and kill. When carrying out the mission, you'll be black bats in the night, trying your best to avoid being discovered by anyone. In between missions, you'll be ordinary mortals in the secular world. You mustn't let anyone discover that you're cultivators. I asked Director Chen to provide you with various spirit pills, weapons, equipment, and resources. Have you gotten them? Got it. Number 50 replied again. All right, Yu Qianzhou nodded his head and said, if there's an emergency, immediately send out a distress signal. Don't force yourself. Remember, I don't need you to die. I will do my best to save each and every one of you, because each and every one of you is a member of the special forces that I have painstakingly trained. Although there will be sacrifices when there are struggles, I don't need you to make meaningless sacrifices. That would be meaningless to you, to your comrades, to the entire Utopia, or even to me. Do you understand? Understood. After the mission is completed, send a signal, and I will bring you back to Utopia. Yu Qianzhou looked at the sky and nodded. According to the original plan, the mission will start from the Daong Kingdom. Then, it will be carried out according to the missions we received. Order. All 50 of them stood at attention. Yu Qianzhou said in a deep voice, the exploration operation begins now. Let's go. Long live the leader. Number 50 exclaimed softly. Then, they identified the direction and quickly scattered in all directions without any hesitation. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned in a circle and watched his team disappear into the night. Some time ago, he had begun to make preparations. He had continuously sent information to Guan Yu and asked Guan Yu to select the members and make a detailed plan. With the convenience of having a detailed topographic map of the various countries in his hands, the plan was quickly perfected. Only then did he name the mission Exploration. The so-called exploration operation was to send team members to infiltrate the various countries and secretly plant the teleportation points that Yu Qianqiu needed at the important locations of the various countries' cultivation worlds. For example, preparations had to be made in advance near the spirit stone mines and important places such as the various sections. As Yu Qianqiu brought back a sum of spirit stones to Utopia, there were more and more early-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators in Utopia. It was enough for him to plan a large-scale attack. However, it seemed a little unrealistic for him to rely on himself to plant teleportation points all over the various countries. Firstly, due to the accident of kidnapping Yin Wufeng and extorting Yin Baikong, his identity had been exposed. He was now too big of a target, and people would probably pay attention to him wherever he went. Secondly, his cultivation was not high enough. Even if he did not expose his identity, it would still take him a lot of time to run all over the various countries. Currently, it was best to send a group of special forces to carry out the mission in secret. With more than 300 countries and 50 special forces members, it would be enough for each person to be assigned to a few countries. If there were no accidents, it would probably be completed in half a year. Of course, it would be faster to send more than 300 special forces members at once, but that would be too big of a target. At the same time, in order to prevent accidents and minimize losses, it was better to have as many capable people as possible. Moreover, some things often happened outside of the plan. He had not been here for long, so he needed to understand more. Moreover, there was another great benefit to him traveling openly in the various countries. He could clear himself of suspicion, and no one would suspect him. For example, there was an accident in country A, but he was thousands of miles away in country B. Who would be able to link these two incidents to him? The next day, Zhang Peng continued to participate in his martial arts competition for a spouse, which made Baiwan Nation's contestants very depressed. With this guy around, no one had the confidence to beat him. It seemed that they had come for nothing. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, did not have the intention to go to the palace again. He did not want to watch that stupid martial arts competition. After getting to know third brother Xian, he wandered around Dayang City for the next few days. With a friend like third brother Xian, Yu Qianqiu felt that it was a good thing. Third brother Xian knew everything about the various countries, so he could ask him if he had any questions. He followed third brother Xian to visit his friends' houses. Although the others did not have a good impression of Yu Qianqiu, they still reluctantly entertained him for third brother Xian's sake. However, after visiting a few houses and learning some news, Yu Qianqiu's expression turned a little ugly, and he was no longer in the mood to stroll around. The two of them returned to Baiwan Nation's embassy. Third brother Xian's expression was also a little ugly. There was no other reason. Yu Qianqiu's actions this time had caused the various countries to lose face. Many experts had already been ordered to come and take Yu Qianqiu's life to regain their lost face. One of third brother Xian's good friends revealed that it was actually fake to regain face. In fact, cultivators from various countries had their eyes on Yu Qianqiu's two treasured sabers. Under the watchful eyes of the public, although the soul formation cultivators behind the scenes wanted to snatch the two treasured sabers, they could not openly snatch the items of the younger generation. In fact, this was also a lie. If no one knew, would the soul formation cultivators make a move? In the cultivation world, it was not uncommon to see people secretly snatching the precious qi-gathering pill. Being concerned about one's identity was just a pretense. Many soul formation cultivators had done it. Most importantly, once a soul formation cultivator made a move, the others would definitely not be polite. At that time, the soul formation cultivators from various countries would definitely fight. Therefore, they all secretly reached an agreement to send their elite disciples to take action. Whoever snatched the sabers and brought them back would own them. Fortunately, Zongming did not want his own capital, Deyang City, to suffer. He said that he would find a way to drive Yu Qianzhou out of Deyang City. The countries where the other soul formation cultivators resided also had their own capitals. Everyone put themselves in Yu Qianzhou's shoes and didn't want to break this rule. Otherwise, retribution could come to their own territories at any time. Everyone could only wait for Yu Qianzhou to leave Deyang City. Knowing that experts from various countries were rushing here and that the area outside Deyang City would soon become his death zone, it would be strange if Yu Qianzhou could be happy. It would be difficult for one or two late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators to fight. Wouldn't hundreds or thousands of them fight together? In the small courtyard, third brother Xian was looking at the flower garden in the middle of the courtyard in amazement. On both sides of the flower garden were green leaves and fresh flowers. They were all alive and well, but why was the one in the middle all dead? It was really strange. Yu Qianzhou sat on the swing, swaying back and forth. He asked weakly, "Third brother Xian, are my two sabers really that enticing?" Third brother Xian walked back and asked in surprise, "Don't tell me you don't know what treasure you have in your hands? When I was in Spirit Fong Valley, I heard that you held a saber drawing conference in the Chinese cultivation world. The news from there said that the two sabers in your hands are spirit treasures from the Eastern Holy Land. The soul formation cultivators here have long been ready to make a move. If it wasn't for the world's #1 expert restraining you, you would have been out of luck." Yu Qianzhou was really speechless. At that time, in order to make more money, he said that the black fire saber was a treasure from the Eastern Holy Land. Unfortunately, that conference was not a success. However, he didn't expect that the nonsense he had cooked up back then would bring him so much trouble. What made him most depressed was that although there were many people who coveted it in the Chinese cultivation world, there wasn't such a big movement. Even he himself didn't think much of it. But he didn't think that in the Chinese cultivation world, he had been flirting with the 4 big families and the #1 sect for a long time. Some sects like the Moon sect also seemed to have an ambiguous relationship with him. Those who wanted to steal the treasures didn't dare to act rashly without knowing the details. They were afraid of attracting unnecessary trouble. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been so polite to him. Actually, everyone was skeptical at first. They didn't really believe that there was a treasure from the Eastern Holy Land. But the bad thing is that you shouldn't have taken it out last time. Think about it. You, a nascent soul cultivator, almost forced a tribulation passing stage cultivator to death with just one saber. The power of this saber is obvious to everyone. Even if it's not a treasure from the Eastern Holy Land, it's still so powerful. Who wouldn't drool over it? Third Lord Xian clicked his tongue. Yu Qianzhou looked at him and said with a frown, "You became friends with me because you took a fancy to my 2 treasured sabers, right?" Third Lord Xian shook his head. "Then you really misunderstood. To me, friends are more important than sabers." Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou's expression showed that he was very doubtful. Third Lord Xian coughed awkwardly. "Let me put it this way. Actually, although your sabers are good, in the hands of cultivators below the soul-forming stage, they won't have any effect at all. It's better to give them a better flying sword. But in the hands of a soul-forming stage cultivator, it's different. Fights between soul-forming stage cultivators usually rely on their high cultivation to fight in close combat. Long-range attacks are almost impossible to hurt because everyone's speed is unbelievably fast. Think about it, if this kind of saber fell into the hands of a soul-forming stage cultivator, it would be too useful. Chapter 505. Yu Qianzhou agreed with this statement. He empathized with them. No matter how powerful the saber was, it was useless against those with high cultivation. If he couldn't catch up with them, he wouldn't be able to slash them. Otherwise, he could really kill them with one strike. It was indeed not as good as a flying sword. If it fell into the hands of a spirit-severing cultivator, he couldn't think of anything that could resist the sharpness of the black flame saber other than the nether iron. The key was that those ignorant spirit-severing cultivators didn't know that even if he gave it to them, it would instantly collapse into black flame once it was too far away from him. But not many people knew this secret except for his master, Nongzhu, and Ze. The three of them knew that his flying sword and saber were condensed from black flame. As for the others, he didn't want to reveal this secret. Aren't your master, Lingfang Valley Master, and your elder brother also at spirit-severing stage? I have 2 sabers here, one for each of them. Yu Qianqiu pretended to ask casually. Third brother Xian scratched his head and smiled bitterly. Your proposal is really good. If you're really willing to give it to me, I'll naturally accept it and thank you. But the premise is that you're willing, and I don't think you're willing. The most important thing is that I never thought of getting my hands on your treasured saber. People from our Spirit Fang Valley don't do this kind of forceful thing. Otherwise, my master won't forgive me. If you don't believe me, I can swear to God. Oh. Yu Qianqiu blinked his eyes. Could it be that the most beautiful woman in the world was an angel with both character and beauty? A top-grade girl? These 3 words suddenly popped up in his mind. He couldn't help but want to meet her as soon as possible. He wanted to see how beautiful the most beautiful woman in the world was to be able to bear the title of the most beautiful woman in the world. He subconsciously thought that it would be great if no one stopped Wen Lanfeng from going to the demon domain when he came out of seclusion. Otherwise, he might be killed by his master. If Lu Yanqing were to lose such a flower protector, then... Yu Qianqiu was shocked by his own dirty thoughts. Speaking of the world's most beautiful woman, this world's most beautiful woman had just left the Holy Land of Baiwan Nation, and Wen Rui arrived right after her. The Holy Land of Baiwan Country was located deep in the mountains in the hinterland of Baiwan Country. Waterfalls, clear springs, birdsong, fragrant flowers, mountains, and fields. It was a place rarely visited by humans, but there was a large number of pavilions and buildings hidden in it. It was the holy land of the Wen clan of Baiwan Country, and also the place where the cultivators of the Wen clan cultivated. Wen Rui returned to the sacred land and immediately went to the valley where the patriarch was in seclusion. At the end of the valley was a stone cliff. In the middle of the cliff, there was a sealed cave. At this moment, the dark entrance of the cave was opened. Obviously, the patriarch had broken out of the cave and really came out. At this moment, a figure suddenly teleported and appeared beside Wen Rui, who was floating in the air. This person's appearance was similar to Wen Rui's, but he was fairer. He was Wen Rui's younger brother Tang, Wen Xiu, a cultivator in the late transcending tribulation. After seeing Wen Rui, he said with a smile, "Big brother, you're back. Have you seen Mr. Nongzhu?" Wen Rui didn't have time to chat with him, so he asked directly, "Where is the patriarch?" After the patriarch came out of seclusion, he asked some questions. He didn't stay long and then left, saying that he had something to do. As Wen Xiu spoke, he suddenly realized something and said, "Big brother, you are a step too late. Just now, the Spirit Fragrance Valley Master came personally to look for the patriarch. When he saw that the patriarch was not around, he immediately left." "You." Wen Rui was so angry that he didn't know what to say. He pointed at him and shouted angrily, "Didn't I tell you to stop the patriarch? Why did you let him go?" "I did. But how could I stop him?" Wen Xiu said with a bitter face. "It's over." Wen Rui murmured to himself with a pale face. There was no need to guess. There were only 2 places that the patriarch was most likely to go after coming out of seclusion: Spirit Fang Valley and the Demon Domain. The Valley Master of Spirit Fang Valley didn't meet him along the way. Needless to say, he must have gone to the Demon Domain to seek revenge on Bai Changchun. It was hard to imagine the scene of the patriarch and Bai Changchun fighting. Wen Rui's heart was in his throat. It didn't matter if the patriarch was defeated. The most important thing was that he came back alive. Otherwise, it was unknown how long the Baiwan nation could last in this precarious situation. The nation had been established for many years and had many enemies. The key was that no one dared to act recklessly with the patriarch. Once he was gone, the consequences would be unimaginable. Big brother, what's wrong? Wen Xiao asked worriedly. Wen Rui turned his head stiffly and said in a stern voice, "Don't you know that the patriarch is most likely going to find Bai Changchun? Why didn't you stop him with your life and wait for me to come back?" Wen Xiao paused and said, "Big brother, I know what you're worried about, but the patriarch has been in seclusion for many years. He must have the confidence to defeat Bai Changchun. Otherwise, how could he be so reckless? Big brother, I think you're worrying too much." "I hope so." Wen Rui sighed helplessly. He had no other choice now. With his speed, it was impossible to catch up with the patriarch. Moreover, there was a time difference, so it was even more impossible to catch up. He was afraid that by the time he arrived at the demon domain, the outcome would have already been decided. Now, even if he wanted to use his great cultivation to persuade the patriarch to come back, he could not get in touch without confirming the correct location. The only thing he could do now was to wait for the final result anxiously. Wen Lanfeng, dressed in a grey robe, was tall and slender. He was neither fat nor thin. Although his appearance was not as good as Nomju's, he was definitely a handsome man. The only flaw was that there was a touch of sadness between his eyebrows, and the stubble on his cheeks made him look a little decadent. In his calm and clear eyes, there was a lingering melancholy. When he looked back, the melancholy in his eyes seemed to be able to turn people into ashes. To be exact, it was soul-stirring. It was believed that this kind of eyes could attract many women. Coupled with his outstanding appearance and profound cultivation, no one knew why he couldn't attract the world's most beautiful woman, so he was so sad. Wen Rui and the others guessed correctly. After Wen Lanfeng came out of seclusion, he did go to find Bai Changchun. At this time, he was flying straight through the sky, and his powerful cultivation forced out a transparent semi-arc-shaped light shield in front of him. He had already crossed the demon domain at a terrifying speed. In the sky above Shantian Island in the 1,000-mile lake, a shadow crossed the sky. Wen Lanfeng stood quietly in the air. He stared at the island in the lake below with a complicated expression, and then slowly swept his eyes around. 100 years ago, it was here that he, who had always been proud of his cultivation, could not withstand 10 moves from his opponent. Only 10 moves. His opponent had seriously injured him. Thinking of this, a bitter smile appeared on Wen Lanfeng's face. That was the biggest mockery to him, the so-called second expert in the world. The second expert could not even withstand 10 moves from the first expert, and was seriously injured on the spot. If it were not for Nomju's timely rescue, he would not have been able to return to this world-famous Shantian Island. 100 years of painstaking cultivation, abandoning all love and selfish thoughts, surprised even himself. He broke through the shackles of cultivation one after another, and his cultivation climbed to new heights. Looking back at his previous cultivation, it was like watching a joke. At that time, he felt that it would be difficult for his cultivation to break through again. He did not expect that Bai Changchun's lesson would give him such a great benefit. He was confident that his current cultivation was worlds apart from that time. If he continued to cultivate in that state, in less than 100 years, his 7-soul hero would merge back into his life soul, and he would be able to ascend to the immortal realm. This was a legend that had not been seen in the cultivation world for many years. However, Wen Lanfeng did not want to ascend to the immortal realm now. He had worries in his heart, and he did not want to become an immortal. As long as he defeated Bai Changchun, he could be with the person he loved. In his opinion, what was the point of becoming an immortal? It was better to stay with the person he loved for a long time. Wen Lanfeng could not help but smile when he thought of his vision of staying with Lu Yanqing. Bai Changchun's life was coming to an end, and he had not been able to ascend to the immortal realm. He must have encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation. He had already broken through that bottleneck, and he only needed to merge his 7-soul hero and life soul before he could ascend. However, he was suppressing his desire to merge with Bai Changchun, which meant that Bai Changchun was no match for him. The position of the world's #1 expert should be replaced. But I have no interest in the empty title of the world's #1 expert. I only want to be with Yanqing. Bai Changchun, you spared my life back then, and I will spare your life now. Wen Lanfeng thought. Ha! Wen Lanfeng felt a little strange. Could it be that his cultivation was so high that Bai Changchun did not notice his arrival? Or was Bai Changchun not on the island at all? He swept his gaze across the island and saw a woman in white tending to the flowers and plants on the island. He could tell at a glance that she was a plant spirit. In another open space, a woman in purple was jumping around crazily, and her movements were very strange. He did not expect to see two more women on Shantian Island. That seemed to be Nongzhu's disciple, Zi. Was Nongzhu also on the island? Wen Lanfeng recognized Zi. Zi, is that you? Wen Lanfeng called out softly. Who called me? Zi, who was drenched in sweat, stopped her posture and looked around. Her gaze finally fell on a figure floating quietly in the air. When she saw who it was, her mouth turned into a cute circle. Lady Mu also noticed the visitor in the air. Zi calmed herself down and flew into the air in a flash. After confirming that it was Wen Lanfeng, she stammered in disbelief, Senior. Senior Wen, why are you here? She really did not dare to believe that Wen Lanfeng would come here. This was the place where he was once humiliated. Could it be that he came here with Senior Bai? Zi had vaguely guessed that possibility. Why can't I come? Wen Lanfeng smiled confidently and said, since you are here, your master must be here too. Where are they? He looked around again. Chapter 506. Seeing that Zi knew him, Miss Mu thought that Zi was also a friend of the punishment envoy, so she went back to her work. My master left. He's not in the demon region, Zi said anxiously. She was afraid that things were not as she thought. Both of them were her master's friends, and she did not want anything to happen to either of them. Hey! Nongzhu actually left you alone on Shantian Island? Wen Lanfeng frowned and said, Bai Changchun is not here either. Where did he go? Senior Bai and ancestor Nanming just left, Zi said, biting her lips. Nanming is also here? Did Bai Changchun invite Nanming here to refine the treasure? Wen Lanfeng frowned. It seemed that he had come at the wrong time, so he asked, Zi, are they refining the treasure in the demon region? I don't know, I think so. Zi replied obediently. This person was not only a friend of her master, but also a top master in the cultivation world, ranking just below Senior Bai, so she was a little afraid. Since he just left, he should not have started refining, so he won't disturb Bai Changchun's business. Wen Lanfeng nodded and said to himself. He was quite self-aware, afraid that he would accidentally ruin Bai Changchun's business by rushing here. Zi asked cautiously, Senior Wen, are you going to duel with Senior Bai? It's not a duel, just a competition. I'll leave after the competition. I won't disturb his business. Wen Lanfeng said this confidently, implying that he only wanted to challenge Bai Changchun, and that he would leave after defeating him. He would not hurt him. His figure rose again, and from dozens of meters to hundreds of meters above the lake, he said loudly, Bai Changchun, time flies, and we haven't met for 100 years. Wen Lanfeng has come to visit you recklessly, please come out for a while. He spoke politely and softly, but Zi and Miss Mu could clearly hear Wen Lanfeng's voice from all directions, and even the echoes from afar were of the same volume, so they could not tell where the voice came from. It was just this one sentence. The voices stacked on top of each other, echoing for a long time. It was as if people were saying the same thing over and over again. The sound spread out like waves, spreading far and wide. It was unknown how far it had traveled. Wherever the voice reached, all the demons and ghosts fell silent, looking in the direction of the obedient island with fear in their eyes. The voice didn't sound like much, but both the Demon King and the Ghost King knew that it was impossible to transmit such a soft voice so far without a shocking cultivation base. At the very least, they couldn't do it. Zi secretly clicked her tongue. As expected of the second strongest expert in the world. Just by revealing a bit of his strength, he was able to use methods that shocked the world. Madam Mu, on the other hand, shuddered subconsciously. She thought that not only was this torture envoy formidable, even his friends had unfathomable cultivation base. Within the array that sealed the blue flames beneath Twilight Valley, the blue flames released dazzling azure hues. Bai Changchun shook out a pile of rare items he had collected over the years. Grandmaster Nan Ming squatted on the ground and fiddled with them as he said, "Refine these items to their purest state. After the next green fire erupts, when the fire is at its most stable state, we can fuse them and refine them." Bai Changchun nodded. 2 days from now should be the day the blue fire erupts. 3 days from now, we can begin the refinement. Nan Ming, when the time comes, I'll be counting on you. Don't say it's too early. The chances of a high-quality spirit treasure being refined into a treasure are extremely low. I'm worried that it will be like last time, refining a high-quality spirit treasure into a defective one. Just don't blame me when the time comes, the Nan Ming ancestor said with a bitter smile. Feel free to refine it. The gains and losses are the will of the heavens. I won't force it, Bai Changchun calmly said. Ah. This blue fire is a good thing. If only my Xianxian island had it. The Nan Ming ancestor sighed, then he suddenly thought of something and asked, Bai Changchun, I remember that you used to have an intermediate-grade spirit treasure sword. Was it not enough for you? I don't think I saw you take it out last time in the Eastern Sea. There probably isn't anyone in the cultivation world that can make you draw your sword, right? There aren't any in the cultivation world, but it doesn't mean that there aren't any in the Holy East lands, Bai Changchun said slowly. The Nan Ming ancestor shook his head. He didn't know what to say. Who knew that Bai Changchun would add, when my cultivation broke through to the late stage of soul formation, I wanted to test my cultivation. Who knew that the intermediate-grade spirit treasure couldn't withstand my full power and instantly shattered into pieces? That's why I asked you to refine a superior-grade spirit treasure. I hope it can withstand the full power of my cultivation. What? The Nan Ming ancestor exclaimed. The intermediate-grade spirit treasure couldn't withstand the power of his cultivation. He asked in shock, Oh my God. An inferior-grade spirit treasure should be able to withstand the use of a late-stage soul formation cultivator. But the intermediate-grade spirit treasure can't withstand your cultivation. This. Bai Changchun, you're still a late-stage soul formation cultivator? I don't know either. That's why I want to go to the Holy East lands to prove it. I want to figure out what's going on. Bai Changchun also smiled bitterly. He then waved his hand and said, Let's not talk about this. Let's hurry. Otherwise, the green fire will be unstable in 2 days and we'll have to postpone it again. The Nan Ming ancestor shook his head and calmed his mind. Then he raised his arms and the 12 rare materials in front of him flew up. But at this moment, his and Bai Changchun's expressions changed at the same time. Both of them seemed to have heard something. The Nan Ming ancestor raised his hand and put away the materials. He turned around and said in surprise, Wen Lanfeng? What is he doing here? Humph. Bai Changchun snorted coldly. He turned around and passed through the wall of light that sealed the green fire. The Nan Ming ancestor didn't say anything. He raised his hand and put all the materials into his storage bag. Then he also rushed out. There were not many opportunities to see the world's number 1 expert and number 2 expert meet, not to mention they were enemies. In the distant sky, Nongzhu hurriedly dragged Furong and flew deep into the demon ghost region. If it weren't for Furong, he would have reached Shantian Island by now. However, just as he saw the bright surface of the 1,000-mile lake in the distance, he suddenly heard a burst of sound. Nongzhu's expression changed drastically. He said hatefully, Damn Wen Lanfeng, you still came here. Is it worth it for a woman? He then raised his speed to the extreme. After shouting, Wen Lanfeng looked at Zi with a smile and stood quietly in the air, waiting for Bai Changchun's arrival. After waiting for a while, Wen Lanfeng seemed to find something wrong with Ziyi's eyes. Her mouth was slightly open in surprise. Her eyes seemed to be focused behind him. The woman in white on the island was also looking in his direction in a daze. There's someone behind me. This was Wen Lanfeng's instant thought, but he immediately denied it. With his current cultivation, it was impossible for someone to be behind him without him noticing. But his intuition told him that someone was staring at him from behind. For people who had reached his level of cultivation, sometimes his intuition was better than his eyes. A chilling feeling made his scalp tingle. He really didn't want to believe it was true. What's the matter? A short voice sounded behind him. When Lanfeng heard the voice that he hadn't heard for a long time, the voice that he would remember for the rest of his life. Bai Changchun's voice. When Lanfeng's pupils suddenly shrank, and then gradually returned to normal. Maybe he was careless, or maybe Bai Changchun had cultivated some mysterious body movement that could approach people silently. But one thing was undeniable. If Bai Changchun had sneakily attacked him just now, the consequences would be really hard to predict. But Bai Changchun would definitely not do that, otherwise he would not be Bai Changchun. He was too proud and always defeated his opponents in a fair and square manner. He disdained to do despicable things. When Lanfeng floated in the air and turned around, staring at the old man who was still hale and hearty, standing with his hands behind his back. He still looked as if he had weathered many hardships, but the older he got, the more spirited he became. He was like a green pine standing on the top of a mountain, drifting in the wind and clouds, looking down on the world, immortal. Lady Mu, who was on the island, felt that something was wrong. If this person was really friends with the punishment enforcer, it would be too strange to meet in such an atmosphere. Ze clutched her clothes so tightly that her knuckles turned white. If these two peerless masters were to fight, the consequences would be really hard to imagine. Should I hide further away? When Lanfeng felt a little numb from his mouth to his throat. He wanted to speak but couldn't. He found that his confidence completely collapsed the moment he saw Bai Changchun with his own eyes. That feeling was indescribable. It was like the first time he broke into the demon domain and saw Bai Changchun. Yes, it was the same feeling. Bai Changchun was clearly in front of him, standing opposite him and looking at him expressionlessly. But the feeling he gave him was as if he was a part of heaven and earth. He just stood there casually and naturally blended into heaven and earth. It was as if he could move the world with just a lift of his hand. In contrast, he was the myriad of living beings in this world, and he was the entire world, always accommodating him. This feeling was like a dream or an illusion. The person in front of him was close at hand. He was real and ethereal, making him unfathomable. It was a terrifying thing to feel this kind of invisible pressure from the opponent when they were facing each other. In fact, the opponent didn't give him any pressure at all, but he felt as if he was shouldering the pressure of the entire world. When Lanfeng understood that this was a kind of momentum. But he couldn't understand why he felt this way when he faced Bai Changchun back then. But now, his cultivation was worlds apart from that time. Could it be that he couldn't see through his momentum? How could this be? When Lanfeng asked himself. He had already reached the critical point where he could fuse the 7 spirits into his life's soul and ascend, but Bai Changchun was still delaying. His cultivation should have already surpassed him, but why was he still like an ant that couldn't see through him? Could it be that he had also reached this realm? Then why did he receive news that he was going to the East Holy Land to seek a breakthrough? The fact that the Nanming ancestor came here to forge a weapon for him was a very good proof. Chapter 507. Ancestor Nanming came slowly, glanced at the two people standing opposite each other, and shook his head slightly. Based on his relationship with them, he did not have the right to stop them. Glancing at Ze, who was staring with her head raised, Ancestor Nanming flashed over and directly banged his head on Ze's head, reprimanding her. Are you tired of living? This is an adult's matter. Why are you here, little girl? Although he and Nongzhu were entangled, they were still friends. Although he could not control Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng, he still had to control Ze. Ze rubbed her head and cried in pain, but Ancestor Nanming dragged her down and threw her back to Shantian Island. Below, an old man and 2 women stared at the scene with wide eyes. What do you want from me? Bai Changchun asked the same question again. His tone was indifferent, without worry, fear, anxiety, or impatience, without the slightest emotion. His voice was ordinary and ordinary, like an ordinary old man asking a question, unlike Wen Lanfeng who could casually stir up an echo between heaven and earth. A trace of bitterness appeared on Wen Lanfeng's face. From Bai Changchun's words and eyes, he could see that he was arrogant and did not take him seriously at all. This courage alone was not something an ordinary person could have. He was indeed the world's #1 expert. Wen Lanfeng's momentum was already slightly inferior. Bai Changchun, the battle that year made me reflect on the painful experience, and I cultivated in seclusion for 100 years. Today, I come. Before Wen Lanfeng could finish, he heard someone shouting in the distance, "Old Bai, Wen Lanfeng, let's talk it out, let's talk it out." Nongzhu saw the two people confronting each other in mid-air from afar. Seeing that they had not started fighting, she hurriedly shouted. Oh! Oh my God! This trip didn't tire me to death, and I finally made it. Nongzhu inserted herself between the two people and said in a somewhat dispirited manner. It seemed that she had indeed used all her strength to fly all the way here, and the genuine vitality in her body was greatly consumed. In the mysterious wave light ball in his hand, Hibiscus was like an imprisoned kitten, looking at Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng pitifully. The unperturbed Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng both looked at the people he brought with him in surprise. They were puzzled. Why did this guy catch a woman? Ancestor Nanming also flashed into the air when he saw Nongzhu coming. He glanced at Hibiscus and asked Nongzhu, "Nongzhu, are you acting like a playboy again? Shut your stinky mouth." Nongzhu then added, "Will you die if you don't watch the fun? Don't you know how to persuade him?" He seemed to be blaming Ancestor Nanming for not coming out to mediate. Ancestor opened his mouth but did not know what to say. Nongzhu to Hibiscus, Hibiscus, and Hibiscus. The few old fellows were just about to discuss business when they heard Ze exclaim, "Ah! Furong, why are you here?" Hibiscus. Ze. Why are you here? Hibiscus said in surprise. When they were on supporting Immortal Island, Yu Qianqiu had brought Ze over once. The two of them knew each other and knew that the other had a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. The two women threw everything to the back of their minds and started chatting. The tense atmosphere between the two great experts of the world, which was on the verge of breaking out, was instantly destroyed by these two girls. Ancestor Nanming elbowed Nongzhu and asked, "Hey! Who is this Hibiscus?" Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng could not remember whose daughter Furong was. Nongzhu would not bring an ordinary person to Shantian Island. However, the two of them didn't know that Hibiscus was just a small disciple of supporting Immortal Island. Given their status, who would care about a mere Fuxin Island? Moreover, he was just a disciple on the island. Naturally, he wouldn't remember who Hibiscus was. Damn it. Don't get touchy. How am I supposed to know? Nongzhu retracted his elbow and stared at the two girls. He had raised Ze since she was young. He was her father, her mother, and her master. In short, Ze grew up in the purple bamboo forest and never had a friend, let alone a close friend. When he saw Ze and Hibiscus chattering happily, he suddenly realized that he was wrong, very wrong. Nonsense. Ancestor Nanming pointed below and questioned, "If you don't know who she is, how can you bring her here? If you don't know who she is, how can she know Ze? Who are you trying to fool?" "How would I know? Yu Qianqiu didn't tell me." Nongzhu was also a little gloomy. Hearing that it was related to his disciple, Bai Changchun looked over and asked, "Nongzhu, what's going on?" Nongzhu was stunned and then said with a smile, "Yu Qianqiu said that this girl is his woman. He said that it would be dangerous if she followed him, so he asked me to bring her here to avoid the danger." Bai Changchun and Ancestor Nanming were stunned at the same time. They stared at Hibiscus and sized her up. Wen Lanfeng's head was filled with bewilderment, but he was quite surprised. He thought to himself, "Who is Yu Qianqiu? How come I've never heard of him?" He must be an extraordinary person to be able to make Nongzhu run errands and make Bai Changchun and ancestor Nan Ming lose their composure. He had been in closed-door training for 100 years and Yu Qianzhou's previous life wasn't even born yet. How could he know who Yu Qianzhou was? It was enough for him to think about it slowly. Among the 4 people in the sky, 3 of them were the 4 great men of the cultivation world. They were only missing Lu Yanqing from Lingfeng Valley. Ever since Ziyi and Yu Qianzhou toured the world of sensual pleasures, she was a little wild. Being trapped in Shuntian Island was boring, so she practiced the awkward animal play every day to kill time. Hibiscus's arrival made her a little too excited. Finally, she had a companion. Yu Qianzhou is too much. He brought you out to play, but he didn't bring me along. It's so dangerous outside. What's there to be afraid of? Danger is fun. If there's no danger, why would I go out with that guy? As Ziyi said this, Nongzhu's face immediately turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Ancestor Nan Ming, who was at the side, looked at her and laughed. He thought that this girl was really funny and could compete with her master. It's really dangerous. It's not fun. Last time, Yu Qianzhou was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. I was scared to death. Yu Qianzhou was beaten to the point of vomiting blood? It can't be. That guy is very bad, who can injure him? Is he okay? As soon as these 2 sentences were spoken, a somewhat oppressive aura filled the air. The breeze blowing around them instantly stopped. As the 2 girls spoke, they also felt that something was wrong. When they suddenly turned around, they suddenly found that the 4 experts in the sky were staring at them. Ziyi stuck out her tongue. The 2 girls shrunk in embarrassment and did not dare to say another word. What a strong aura. Wen Lanfeng's pupils shrank. She slowly turned to look at Bai Changchun. She thought that he was going to fight, but she found that he was staring at Nongzhu. Nongzhu and ancestor Nan Ming looked at each other, then secretly turned their heads to look back. Nongzhu found that Bai Changchun was staring at her and could not help but smile awkwardly. Bai Changchun indifferently asked word by word, Nongzhu, who hurt Yu Qianzhou? Old Bai, don't think about it. His skin is rough and his flesh is thick. He has already recovered from a minor injury. Nongzhu said and shook her head with a bitter smile. She said, in fact, that guy asked for it. He claimed to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. It would be strange if people did not find trouble with him. I'll tell you in detail later. The aura of fear disappeared in an instant. Bai Changchun was stunned. He claimed to be the world's #1 expert, but his disciple ran out and claimed to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. If people knew that she was his disciple, it would really make him proud. Wen Lanfeng could not help asking, Nongzhu, who is this Yu Qianzhou? Why have I never heard of him? Nongzhu smiled and raised her chin toward Bai Changchun. She said, his last disciple. Wen Lanfeng uttered an ah and then hesitated. A famous master produces a brilliant disciple. No wonder he dares to claim to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. He must be worthy of it. Although it was a perfunctory compliment, it sounded a little harsh. Bai Changchun's calm face was slightly dark. It seemed that he felt ashamed for the first time in his long life. Nongzhu secretly thought, Wen Lanfeng, you really want to die. Aren't you being sarcastic? Sure enough, after Bai Changchun's face calmed down, he stared at Wen Lanfeng indifferently and said, from what you said before, do you mean that after 100 years of closed-door training, your cultivation has greatly improved and you came here to wash away your shame? Who was Wen Lanfeng? He was not a coward who was afraid to fight. He was provoked by Bai Changchun's words on the spot and his previous worries were immediately thrown out of the window. This was the true arrogance of a top expert. He would never retreat in the face of a battle and would only concentrate on one thing, to defeat his opponent. Life or death, victory or defeat, these were things to be considered after the battle. Wen Lanfeng laughed heartily and replied in a sonorous voice, the battle 100 years ago, Wen Lanfeng will never forget it. The 100 years of closed-door training is just to be qualified to meet the punishment master of the demon ghost region again. Today, I would like to experience the demeanor of the world's #1 expert again. The last sentence was particularly impassioned. Don't get excited, don't get excited. Nongzhu waved her hand anxiously between the two. However, both of them had entered a state of high spirits and simply ignored Nongzhu. Wen Lanfeng's whole body erupted with a strong fighting spirit. His grayish-white robes suddenly fluttered despite the absence of wind, stirring the surrounding airflow to gradually solidify and appear like blades. Ancestor Nanming quickly released a transparent protective upstanding qi, but unexpectedly, he still felt a little overwhelmed. The wind blades constantly made ear-piercing sounds on the upstanding qi, and the entire protective upstanding qi could be destroyed by the wind blades at any time. This was the turbulence caused by the light qi ji before they started fighting. What would happen if they started fighting? Ancestor Nanming's eyes were full of horror. Wen Lanfeng was indeed worthy of his reputation as the world's second expert, but he did not expect him to be so powerful. It was far beyond his understanding of experts in the late stage of the incarnation realm. Without another word, Ancestor Nanming retreated in the face of difficulties. This was not a place where he could stay with his cultivation, so he quickly flashed back to the island. Nongzhu also had a protective upstanding qi, but her cultivation was obviously higher than Ancestor Nanming's. She shouted, "You two lunatics! There is no deep hatred between you two. Will you only be satisfied when you fight to the death? Get out of the way!" Wen Lanfeng shouted. His qi ji locked on to Nongzhu, and the dancing wind blades immediately swept over, cutting Nongzhu's protective upstanding qi to the point that it almost collapsed. Nongzhu immediately felt that she could not take it anymore, and she shouted, "You two lunatics, just die. You're making me worry less." As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly fled and was forced to leave. Bai Changchun, who was opposite Wen Lanfeng, was very quiet. His expression was indifferent, so quiet that it was a little ridiculous. He did not make as much noise as Wen Lanfeng. His clothes, beard, and hair did not even move in the chaotic wind. Wen Lanfeng's eyes were bright as he stared at Bai Changchun. The wind blades crazily swept towards Bai Changchun, but when they were 2 meters away from his body, the wind blades silently and inexplicably collapsed and disappeared. They had no effect on Bai Changchun. The few people on the island stared at him, and Lady Mu bit her lip. She already knew what was going to happen. She did not expect that she would have the opportunity to see the torture envoy, who was famous in the demon domain, in action. She did not know who the other person was, but he actually dared to challenge the torture envoy. It seems that you've really made a lot of progress in the past 100 years of hard cultivation. You can't be compared to the past. No wonder you have the confidence to come to me, Bai Changchun said lightly. I also feel that I've made a lot of progress. Wen Lanfeng nodded and asked, "How do I compare to you?" "I don't know my own cultivation level, and I've been looking forward to someone who can help me understand myself. After seeing you." Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said, "What a pity. The person who can help me understand is not you. You don't even know what level your cultivation has reached?" Wen Lanfeng laughed and said, "I understand now. You mean that I'm still not your opponent?" Bai Changchun said, "It doesn't matter whether you're my opponent or not. The most important thing is that you must remember one thing." "What thing?" Wen Lanfeng asked. "Cultivators above the soul formation stage who trespasses the demon domain will die." Bai Changchun said lightly. "Haha." Wen Lanfeng laughed and waved his hand. A cold light flashed out of his storage bag, and a wide long sword appeared in front of him. The blade was as wide as a palm, and there was a flowing mercury-like luster on its surface. Wen Lanfeng gently grabbed the hilt and said, "My giant silver sword failed to force your sword out, and it has been sealed until now. If you can force my sword out, I'll spare your life." Bai Changchun said quietly. "Haha." Wen Lanfeng laughed wildly and said, "Bai Changchun, you're too conceited. Today, unless you're an immortal from the upper realm, I'll make you understand the bottom line of your cultivation level." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, there were thousands of Wenlanfeng and thousands of giant silver swords in the air, standing above Bai Changchun's head. It was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. The surrounding airflow was dead silent. On Obedient Island, Nongzhu, an elder ancestor of Nanming, looked at each other. The two women were stunned. They had seen people who could create many phantoms, but at this time, the thousands of Wenlanfeng in the air were motionless as if they were real bodies. They moved. One of the thousands of Wenlanfeng moved, and with a dazzling silver light, it drew a gorgeous and charming arc. From top to bottom, the sword came from the west, fast as lightning, and slashed toward Bai Changchun's head. Just as the sword was about to touch Bai Changchun, a third hand seemed to grow out of Bai Changchun's body, and his fingers were like picking flowers. Chapter 508. With a ding sound, it hit the side of the sword's edge, and the man and the sword disappeared without a trace. It was just a soft and crisp sound, without any great power that could shake people's hearts. Not even the sound of wind could be heard. However, it made people feel that everything in that space was still except for the two people fighting. The sound, light, and airflow gave people a feeling that they had been frozen. Hibiscus's cultivation was too low, so she couldn't see any clues. She was already dumbfounded when she saw the thousands of Wenlanfeng's incarnations. Zi opened her mouth. According to her understanding, there could only be one real Wenlanfeng among the thousands of incarnations, and the others were all phantoms. But how could phantoms turn into a tangible form and carry out a substantial attack? Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming understood that this seemingly peaceful place was extremely dangerous. The two of them restrained all of their great power and didn't waste any of it. All of their power was gathered between the sword and the finger. There were not many people in this world who could withstand this sword and finger. They moved again. A sword came from the south, followed by a sword from the east, and then from the north, south, east, and west. Wenlanfeng's attacks were as dense as rain. One man and one sword were like flying immortals from the heavens, leaving behind a shadow. They abandoned all magnificence and only pursued a simple fatal blow. One man and one sword, only one sword, without any extra movements. One man and one sword's fatal blow was simple and unadorned, but when thousands of people and one sword's fatal blows fused together, it formed the most gorgeous visual shock. Thousands of Wenlanfeng, thousands of huge silver swords, and thousands of silver electric shadows interweaved in the air to form a huge, gorgeous silver lotus in full bloom. Thousands of attacks, in the end, all focused on the flower's stem, and Bai Changchun was the white lotus stem that suffered the storm-like attacks. What a beautiful, blooming white lotus. Hibiscus was stunned. She never thought that cultivators could fight in this way. Zi was stunned. It was too spectacular. This was the fight between the world's #1 expert and the world's #2 expert. Lady Mu was afraid that the torturer couldn't withstand such an attack. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming stared at their every move without blinking their eyes. Bai Changchun's expression was calm. With his hands behind his back, he remained motionless like a mountain, withstanding the thousands of attacks in the sky. Thousands of arms also appeared on his shoulders, making him look like the thousand-armed Guanyin. It was extremely beautiful. Ding, ding, ding. A series of rapid and crisp sounds rang out. Every finger would hit its target, and every single one of them was able to thwart the sharpness of the giant silver sword. With a flick of his finger, Wenlanfeng's body and sword unity collapsed. In the blink of an eye, the silver lotus gradually dissipated in the air. It was a magnificent opening, but a depressing curtain call. Nongzhu and ancestor Nan Mian heaved a sigh of relief. If Wenlanfeng's 1,000 swords unite was used on them, they would not be able to withstand 100 swords if they did not escape, let alone 1,000 swords. It seemed that only a person with an abnormally high cultivation like Bai Changchun could remain still like a mountain and deal with it with ease. Moreover, he didn't even draw his weapon and merely flicked his finger lightly to break Wenlanfeng's 1,000 swords as one. His finger avoided the sharpness and flicked the side of the sword tip. It would be fine if it was just one or two, but it happened that thousands of swords burst out almost at the same time. There was probably no one in the world who could compare to him in terms of eyesight. Although the two were relieved, they knew that this was just the beginning of the warm-up, and the real fight was yet to come. Bai Changchun is indeed Bai Changchun. I can't believe that my 1,000 swords unite couldn't even force you to move a step. Wen Lanfeng's sigh sounded around, but only his voice could be heard. I don't have time to chat with you. If you don't make a move, I will. Bai Changchun said calmly. Good. Then come on. Let me experience the power of the world's #1 master again. Wen Lanfeng's voice was still heard, but no one else could be seen. You overestimate yourself. Bai Changchun snorted coldly. His figure flickered, and he also disappeared. The few people on the island looked around but found nothing. Suddenly, a series of rapid bangs sounded high up in the sky. They quickly looked up, and when the last bang sounded, they saw Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng appear above at the same time. The two had obviously fought several times in a race of speed. Otherwise, there would have been no sound for no reason. The two were so fast that the people below couldn't see them clearly. Ah! Puff! A muffled groan sounded in the air. Wen Lanfeng's figure seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. He fell like a meteor and quickly fell to the surface of the 1,000-mile lake. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming exchanged a surprised look. They could see that Wen Lanfeng was injured, but they didn't know what Bai Changchun had done to him. Whoosh! Bai Changchun's figure appeared intermittently from high up in the sky. This was not teleportation, but a pure speed pursuit. He chased after Wen Lanfeng. At their level of cultivation, it was impossible to cause effective damage to their opponents from afar. They needed to hit them head-on. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming's hearts were in their throats. Although Bai Changchun had injured Wen Lanfeng, he obviously didn't want to let Wen Lanfeng go and was chasing him. Sword without an arrow. Wen Lanfeng, who was falling rapidly, shouted and stopped in the air due to the strong inertia. The strong wind brought by his fall pressed a huge arc of deep whirlpool on the surface of the lake that was only a few dozen meters away from him. As the deep whirlpool bounced up, Wen Lanfeng, who had stopped, also bounced up and roared into the sky. The sword in his hand produced a giant sword aura that was more than 20 meters long. It stirred up huge chaotic sword shadows, like messy transparent thorns shooting through the air, madly stabbing at Bai Changchun who was chasing after him. The two powerhouses brazenly confronted each other head-on. However, Bai Changchun seemed to have fallen into a pile of crystal-clear thorns. Clang, clang, clang. The fight directly entered a white-hot stage. This was the last scene that the women in purple clothes saw clearly. Then, the figures of the two peerless powerhouses became blurred again. With the cultivation of the three women, they could no longer see clearly. They could only see the messy and terrifying sword aura sweeping everywhere. Bang, bang. The sound of banging was endless. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming's eyes almost narrowed into slits. They stared at the two people fighting with sparkling eyes. They knew that Bai Changchun did not want to destroy his territory, so he deliberately suppressed his destructive aura. Wen Lanfeng was not here to cause trouble. At the same time, in order not to show weakness, he also suppressed his destructive aura. Otherwise, with such a crazy fight between the two people, the power emitted was earth-shattering, and the shocking and terrifying shock wave alone could completely destroy Obedient Island. They could not just stand on the island and watch the show as if nothing had happened. TSK, TSK. Wen Lanfeng's cultivation has really improved by leaps and bounds. In the past, it would be impossible for him to fight against old Bai so valiantly. How strong! Nongzhu exclaimed. Ancestor Nanming glanced at him, knowing that he had seen the battle 100 years ago. His gaze returned to the two people fighting. The more Wen Lanfeng fought, the stronger his fighting spirit became. The defeat 100 years ago was so sullen that he almost did not have the strength to fight back and was beaten half to death. He had never had the opportunity to fight with an expert like Bai Changchun so happily. With the giant silver in hand, the sword moved with his heart. His entire body and mind were completely integrated with the sword, achieving the true unity of man and sword that he dreamed of. The sword was him, and he was the sword. With the unity of man and sword, he was invincible. Fighting against the world's #1 expert, his fighting spirit and heroic spirit soared to the sky. Wen Lanfeng was secretly amazed. It was a great blessing to be able to fight with an expert like Bai Changchun. It directly stimulated his potential. The shackles between man and sword were broken in an instant. The sword in his hand burst forth with infinite possibilities at will. I don't believe I can't force you to use your sword. Wen Lanfeng's fighting spirit soared. He exerted force again and trapped Bai Changchun in a net of sword gang. The two fighting figures became more and more blurred, and even the huge sword gang was flickering. The sky and the earth were suddenly, up and down, left and right, and loud noises were constantly heard. Hiss. Ancestor Nanming felt a toothache and his eyes were almost blurred. He gasped and rubbed his face with both hands. He said excitedly, "This trip is not in vain, not in vain. Wen Lanfeng is really amazing. He can actually fight with Bai Changchun to this extent." Nongzhu rubbed her blurred eyes and said suspiciously, "Why do I feel that something is wrong?" She then turned around and asked, "Nanming, if I remember correctly, the giant silver in Wen Lanfeng's hand should be a middle-grade spiritual treasure. Do you think a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword can trap Bai Changchun?" He and Bai Changchun were good friends. He knew that Bai Changchun once had a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword, but it collapsed because it could not withstand his strong cultivation. In other words, a middle-grade spiritual treasure could not withstand Bai Changchun's power at all. But how could he be trapped by a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword? Ancestor Nanming was slightly stunned. He happened to hear Bai Changchun mention this before. Now that he thought about it, it was indeed not right. He said in a muffled voice, "Maybe Wen Lanfeng's cultivation is profound, and he can exert the power of the giant silver sword to a higher level?" Nongzhu shook her head slightly, feeling that this explanation was still a bit unreliable. From the fight just now, when Lanfeng was injured by Bai Changchun, it could be seen that the former was obviously not a match for the latter, and the gap was not just a little bit. It was a bit of a joke to think that such a gap could trap the opponent with just the sword gang. Nongzhu murmured, holding her chin, "What is old Bai doing? Is he deliberately letting him win?" It was not that he was letting Wen Lanfeng win, but Bai Changchun was getting more and more excited as the fight went on. He did not want to defeat Wen Lanfeng so quickly. He had fought countless times in the cultivation world, and he had seen all kinds of opponents. However, just now, he suddenly found that Wen Lanfeng seemed to have understood something. Facing the sword moves that he was barely supporting, Wen Lanfeng suddenly became at ease. This fellow actually broke through another shackle in this life and death struggle. And he immediately integrated it seamlessly. Bai Changchun secretly marveled that this guy was really a rare genius in the world. No wonder his cultivation could advance by leaps and bounds in just 100 years of closed-door training. What a pity. If he was not so infatuated, his achievements in the future would be limitless. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.